The story begins with Lady Arya breaking a glass, causing the noise to spread throughout the room. The maid immediately ran up, knelt down, and said that she would clean everything up. However, she noticed that Lady Arya had injured her leg, so she noted it in shock. The room began to discuss what had happened, starting to say that dropping a glass was quite awkward. Commoners have no manners at all. Everyone looked at Arya and wondered if she would start crying like she loved to do. At this point, the girl turned to Jessie, asking her to hand her a handkerchief. The maid immediately responded to this. After that, the girl added that she had hurt her leg, so it would be nice if she brought some medicine too. Jessie nodded her head and turned around. Soon, our heroine apologized for causing a fuss, as it was against etiquette, but she was still forced to leave the table first. She also added that people should not worry about her and continue enjoying their meal. Everyone in the room was in shock, because the impossible had happened. For some unknown reason, Arya still followed etiquette, which is why everyone started whispering again. After the girl started to distance herself, some of the guys even laughed, saying that Arya was like a different person. The funniest thing was that it was actually true, because she was not the Arya that all these people knew. By the way, our heroine was very happy to see Mielle in front of her again. She owed this girl a lot, which is why she could not be indifferent to her. That is why the girl decided for herself that she would definitely repay her in full. The action takes us back to the past. An unknown swordsman ordered to raise the sinner's head. Then he stared into the eyes of the girl who was silently looking at him. The man sighed heavily and said that she herself knew what her fault was. That's why he justified himself by saying that he was doing her a huge favor, and all this was just for her sake. Her malicious tongue, which accused innocent souls of nothing, even if only a little, will be cleansed and will no longer be able to slander. At that moment, the children started calling the boy, asking him to show them everything and let them see it. The swordsman hid what was in his hand and said that they would be cursed if they thoughtlessly looked. He explained that the villainess had a poisonous tongue, which is why it was placed in salt. Our heroine looked at the floor with a doomed look, not understanding how everything had come to this. She could no longer remember. She couldn't think of anything else, except that now she wanted to change everything. At that moment, the girl turned to her brother and said that she would like to personally tell her sister Arya something. The guy, perplexed, told Mielle that it was simply impossible, but the girl stood her ground. She said that she was also to blame for what happened to the girl, so she just wanted to talk. And again the guy screamed in bewilderment, talking about what Arya did to her, but Mielle replied that she knew all about it. Her sister accused her of stealing, pushed her down the stairs, and even tried to poison her. But she saw her own guilt in all of this. The brother desperately tried to stop Mielle, but the girl said that if he understood her feelings at all, she asked him to let her say something goodbye to her sister. And soon people began to shout in one voice that they were shocked that the girl was not afraid at all of the one who planned to kill her. Our heroine raised her head and saw Mielle in front of her. She knew that she was not guilty of anything because only Arya had made a mistake, and now she was paying for tormenting her. Arya mentally apologized to her sister because she... At that very moment, Mielle came closer and shouted for everyone to be quiet. Our heroine opened her eyes again, but when she saw Mielle in front of her, she froze in fear. She didn't know what had happened to her, which is why she couldn't even recognize her. However, the girl leaned towards her sister and said that she had been holding back for a long time, and yet she had something to tell. In a whisper, she told our heroine that she was extremely stupid because she did not see obvious things. She gave the example of the servants who seemed to be closest to Arya. But it turned out that they all worked for Mielle. All the conversations, all the help, all the secrets that the girl told the servants passed through Mielle's ears. The girl knew that Arya was trying to turn the servants against her, but even that was part of her plan. People, looking at Mielle, were touched that she was praying for Arya, who was trying to poison her. They didn't hear what the girls were talking about, but at that moment, Mielle decided to ask her sister if she knew why she did all this. Hearing no answer, she decided to answer anyway. It was simple, because from the day she crossed the threshold of their house, arm in arm with her slutty mother, even through the fake smile, she was already thinking about how to get rid of Arya. The girl looked at her sister with a cold-blooded gaze and said that she was the embodiment of the shame of their family, and therefore she had no right to even laugh. That is why, waving her hand, Mielle said that everyone should know that there are people who deserve to die, and she will show everyone exactly such a person. Looking at her little sister, she proudly said that her suffering was a real pleasure for her. Death by poison would have been too easy for her, but it was just right for her mother, so she decided to set her up with the same method of poisoning. Her plan worked perfectly, because everyone instantly decided that both of these incidents were Arya's doing. Mielle started laughing madly, saying that no one even suspected her, no matter how many sins she committed, and yet she did it all. Looking at Arya, the girl couldn't stop wondering how one could be so stupid. And what's more, she added that even her birth was a mistake. Anyway, she doesn't know what about her, but she will never forget those wonderful days they spent together. With a smile on her face, she said that her heart literally bled when she thought that her beloved sister would soon be gone. Looking at a puzzled Arya, who seemed to still be processing all the information she had heard, Mielle said that she would miss her. Shortly after the girl's performance, a sword swung, and then Arya's lifeless body fell to the ground. Our heroine was in shock. She couldn't believe what had happened, because she couldn't just die like that. Moreover, she didn't want to die like that. Replaying the last seconds of her life in her head, she begged all the gods to return her to the past. She even laughed, saying that it would be nice to be an hourglass. However, she understood that if she returned, she would change everything. For example, she would not let the servants lead her by the nose. She would save her mother, and our heroine was still thinking about many things that she wanted to do, which is why she did not hear everything that was around her. But at that moment, a loud scream pulled her out of her thoughts. Arya finally came to her senses. Opening her eyes, she found herself sitting at the dinner table with her family. The woman sighed heavily, thinking about this strange child, who not only had no manners, but also dozed at the table. At that moment, Mielle asked her sister with a frightened look if she was okay. But our heroine thought that if she really came back, and if she had a chance to repay her debt, then she would definitely take advantage of it. Arya, who had just broken a glass at that moment, assumed that this was exactly what she should do. The clock, as our heroine had wished, was turned over, so a smile instantly appeared on the girl's face. From that day on, Arya was determined to act like a true villain. She immediately turned to Jessie and asked her to hand her a handkerchief. Already in her room, our heroine sighed heavily, because there were now too many different thoughts in her head. The girl who was now anxiously helping our heroine, hoping that she would not be left with a scar, is called Jessie. It was this maid who was the only one who tried to help Arya, but still she too met an unpleasant fate. She should not have denied herself for the sake of our heroine. Our heroine mentally asked for forgiveness from Jessie, which caused her to shed a tear. Jessie realized, assuming that Lady Arya was hurt, but the girl said that she simply dozed off. However, the maid apologized for bringing the medicine so late. During the meal, she also seemed tired. Arya said that everything was fine and that she wanted to rest. Right away, Jessie helped to prepare everything for sleep. But our heroine felt only that the body was very heavy. She still could not understand whether it was reality or a nightmare. However, looking around, she realized that if everything was real, then now this room seemed alien to her. The previous Arya, for some unknown reason, filled the entire room with incomprehensible children's things. At this point, Jessie told the lady that she had prepared everything so they could go and rest. The girl really understood that it didn't matter where the dream was and where reality was, so it was better to rest first. However, as soon as Arya settled down in bed, she immediately jumped up and started screaming. The maid, who had almost left, turned around in horror. Our heroine turned to Jessie and said that there was something strange under the blanket, which was causing her body to burn. When the maid lifted the blanket, she was surprised to find an hourglass in the bed that was broken. Arya was very surprised, but Jessie said that they were indeed on the bed before lunch, but she was cleaning them. In any case, the girl apologized and said that she would clean everything now. Our heroine at that very moment seemed to have an epiphany. Taking pity on her stupidity, they saved the deceived, pathetic girl. Arya reached for the bed, but the maid screamed in bewilderment and asked my lady to be careful. Our heroine grabbed the sand that was spilling out of her hands. So, this was their gift to her. The girl decided that this was the most genuine mercy towards her, and yet he gave the poor thing another chance. She began to squeeze both the sand and the glass in her hands, causing Jessie to scream in horror. Our heroine could not hold back her tears, because she knew that for this mercy, she was obliged to try with all her might and repay the magnanimous Lord God. This time, the girl was going to live a life that she would not regret later. She swore that she would give something much better than death to those who made her life a nightmare. The girl never stopped thanking God for giving her a chance to avenge herself. But Jessie, who was watching the lady, simply did not understand what was happening, which is why she did not even know whether she should come closer. This maid had been through a lot, and the girl, being the child of a girl with low social responsibility, behaved terribly and had no manners at all. And yet the girl knew that it was not the child's fault, because it all happened because of her origin. Lady Mielle also understood this, so she assigned Jessie to Lady Arya. The girl asked her to take good care of her sister. She asked to keep an eye on Arya so that she would not deny herself anything, but her words, when translated, meant that the girl needed to be watched and helped to find an excuse to throw her out of the palace. The maid was pleasantly surprised, so she gladly agreed to this assignment. She was amazed that even Mielle could love Lady Arya. At that moment, our heroine pulled Jessie out of her thoughts and asked if the watch could still be repaired. The maid was surprised, but said that she would take it to a repairman. And yet, looking at Lady Arya, Jessie promised Lady Mielle that she would do her best to take care of the lady. The maid believed that she could handle it, and she justified Lady Arya's behavior now by saying that the medicine was affecting her in this way, which was why she was so emotional. In any case, the action is transferred sometime ahead. The man sat down at the table, saying that they had not gathered together at the same table for a long time. Arya's biological mother, Countess Recente, smiled as she told Count Recente, who was Arya's adoptive father, that he was always busy for their well-being, but without him, the estate was lonely. The man laughed and said that it was the duty of the head of the family, so there was no point in being offended by him. However, the Countess smiled and replied that she tried to take good care of the house. But the eldest son of the Recente family, whose name was Cain, only looked at his adoptive mother with disgust, thinking that a girl with low social responsibility could be seen a mile away. The second daughter of the Recente family, Mielle, said that she looks forward to receiving gifts from her father every time he returns, because she feels his love in each gift. The man laughed, saying that even if he was far away, he always thought of them. Arya, the family's eldest daughter, laughed because he had never given her anything, but still asked her to read a poem for her father. The Count asked in bewilderment if Arya had really learned the poem. The girl nodded and said that, in any case, they still had time before lunch. In just a few seconds, the girl was reading a poem. The head of the family looked at his daughter in the same bewilderment and was surprised. Our heroine, in turn, continued to speak clearly. "The sad spring has passed. Oh, Rose, how dear you are to me. And only one thing remains for me, to applaud your beauty." Soon the girl was bowing, and the man laughed in surprise, saying that Arya had definitely studied hard. The girl's mother smiled and said that she had studied even without the means to do so. In any case, studying here will be more accessible. Arya was perplexed, because before she ate rotten vegetables, just to have something to eat, not to mention studying, and still she said that she would try her best. In the past, Arya never really learned anything because she was always compared to Mielle. The past she didn't know that Mielle was trying to be better than her in everything. Arya thought there was no point in fighting, so she just gave up and cared only about her appearance. At that moment, Mielle clapped, saying that this was the famous poem of the first Count. However, she said that she taught him at the age of 4. But still, did Arya know that there is another answer to this piece? This is exactly what the fight with knowledge was about. Mielle continued that she was just learning it. The poem was probably unknown to them, so she asked to be allowed to read it to the family. And finally she began to tell, "You are free to pick all the roses. Politely, it doesn't matter. The passage of time, followed by frosts, will take them from your hands." A few moments later, the girl finished reading. Immediately, everyone at the table began clapping, saying that Mielle's recitation was getting better and better each time. Even our heroine told her sister that it was an incredibly beautiful poem. But at that moment, our heroine said that her sister apparently was not aware of the truth hidden in the lines of this answer. Arya was glad that Mielle had fallen for her trick. Finally, the girl said that these were the poems of her younger brother, who planned to kill the first count for political purposes, and she, in truth, deliberately did not teach him. And yet, in the past, our heroine actually learned it, which is why she was scolded by Cain. The guy was puzzled that she did not know the meaning of the words, but was reciting a poem. Not only was she a commoner, but she also decided to humiliate them in a joke. He was perplexed by how she dared to look down on the nobles. That's why it was funny that at that moment she was faced with criticism from her older brother. And now he just kept quiet as a fish. The count at that moment said that there was a curse hidden in these verses, but Mielle obviously did not know about it, so she learned it. Nevertheless, for the girl who mindlessly crammed everything, this was certainly a big blow. However, at this point, Cain decided to stand up for his sister, so he said that Mielle was only 13, and therefore the fact that she was able to learn this poem was already commendable. Our heroine tried to hold back her laughter because of such a warm relationship between the siblings, and yet she restrained herself, for the sight of this mutual consolation only whetted her appetite. Turning to God, she thanked him for the gift of daily bread, which she could now enjoy every day. This warmed her soul very much. Thanks to the power of the hourglass, our heroine knew the future, what awaited her. That is why, having returned to the past, the girl already knew what to do and how to do it. At that very moment, the girl began to skillfully use a knife and fork, cutting a piece of meat perfectly. As a result of these strokes, she ended up with perfect cuts of meat that could be displayed in a gallery. Our heroine knew that she needed to study etiquette, and yet, at that moment, she proudly raised her head, and the lady standing next to her was simply in shock. The girl smiled and told Lady Arya that she was improving little by little, which was actually amazing. By the way, she was the only daughter of Viscount Lorraine. Our heroine smiled and said that this was only the teacher's merit, because she explains everything well. Lauren Sarah was also Arya's home tutor. Arya at this point admitted that she would like to become as elegant as her, so she will study hard so as not to disgrace her. Sarah was shocked, because the girl seemed to have been replaced by someone, but our heroine knew that she should make friends with her, the future Marquise. In the future, Sarah would become the Marchioness of Vincent, and it was said that she loved children more than life itself. Our heroine was going to take advantage of this, as she would have patronage. In the past, she had never learned the rules of etiquette until her death, and was not going to, because she saw no need. Arya inherited her mother's beauty, which made many men want to be with her, even if she was ignorant. At that time, she thought that she could surpass Mielle with her looks alone. But beauty fades sooner or later, or even becomes boring even earlier. Mielle, even for a noblewoman, learned quickly and ended up being much better than her peers in everything. That is why, since she succeeded, our heroine will also be able to learn etiquette, easily, calmly, smoothly, and neatly. Arya proudly declared to herself and Mielle that if she waited a little longer, she would become just as villainous, although she even thought that she would become an even bigger villain, whom she would not be able to surpass. Sarah looked at Arya and saw a bright child in her. She remembered their first meeting, when the girl threw herself into her arms. The Countess laughed and asked for forgiveness, because Arya still had a lot to learn, so she wanted Sarah to continue to take care of her. Sarah smiled back and said that she was only happy because the child was happy. So, looking at her, she simply did not understand where all the terrible rumors came from. The lady decided that someone had started to dissolve them out of envy, because the girl was charming enough to firmly establish herself in high society. But now she was a real aristocrat, and she would help her. Sarah, at this point, told the girl that she was making great progress, and if she continued in the same spirit, then within this year they would master basic etiquette. The lady supposed that she had already gotten used to table etiquette, since it had caused difficulties before. Our heroine smiled and nodded her head, saying that it was all thanks to her. In the past, our heroine did not like to eat at the table, which is why she was capricious a lot. But yesterday she showed what she can do. Because of this, even her mother told her that her manners were especially good. Arya smiled and said that she would definitely tell the teacher about it. The Count also said that progress was visible thanks to her training, and if she wanted to learn something more, then she could boldly take on anything. By the way, the girl simply couldn't stand salads, but as soon as she added some spices, the salad was quite tolerable. Of course, it wasn't as tasty, but it was tolerable. At this point, Mielle said that she thought that the food had been put in her sister's bowl haphazardly. Arya asked in confusion if she was really implying that the servants were expressing their contempt in this way. Our heroine said that this was a fair remark, because she had indeed behaved terribly before. Mielle, horrified, caught herself and began to say that she had not meant it. However, Arya turned to her sister and said that she apparently decided that she might not have noticed that there was something wrong with her food, but she knows how vivid her imagination is. And still, sighing heavily, our heroine said that she could not even imagine that she had such an opinion about her. Mielle desperately began to say that it was just a joke. The head of the family coughed and told his daughter to think 100 times before saying anything next time, because she had upset her sister. For our heroine, Mielle's upset expression was the best reward for her efforts. She told the teacher that yesterday she also cut everything neatly and ate it. Sarah, with a smile on her face, said that she was already very skilled. And just then, our heroine decided to slowly begin her plan. The girl approached the teacher and said that she really wanted to learn something from her. Sarah was excited, and yet, if she could help in any way, she would definitely teach her. Our heroine said with a smile on her face that she would like to learn embroidery. It was previously rumored that the scarf that drew the Marquise Vincent's attention to Sarah was decorated with magnificent embroidery, into which her soul was invested. Lady Sarah's embroidery demonstrated not only the craftsman's skill, but also her inner world. The story of the lady who became a marchioness served as an example for many ladies. There was also a legend that if a man carries a scarf given to him by his wife or daughter, he will live a long life and have good health. The aristocrats clearly had nothing better to do, because how could a rag be a talisman? And yet, missing such a chance would have been a crime. Unexpectedly, when she was brought into the Count's family, she could not understand what aristocracy was, and it was very difficult for her to grasp it. The saddest thing was that no one even thought about lending her a helping hand. So this time, she decided to start by infiltrating their ranks. The aristocrats wouldn't have time to suspect anything before they were destroyed. Arya decided for herself that if God gave her such a chance, then she should take everything from it. Soon our heroine decided to take a rest, and the action smoothly moves to the next day. The girl sat next to Lady Sarah, who was teaching her embroidery, telling her how and what to pull. Lady Arya did everything perfectly. Because of this, the woman told her that she was a very capable student. Arya was even surprised, because it was even easier than she thought. In the past, whenever she took up embroidery, she would get very nervous and immediately give it up. Although, at that time, she simply did not see any point in it. But now, she needed embroidery for her purpose. The girl showed the scarf, and Sarah asked in surprise if it was silk. Arya smiled and said that she wanted to give this scarf to her dad. Because of this, her mother gave her the best fabric, and she wanted to embroider their family crest on it, or more precisely, a lily. Sarah smiled and said that it really looked luxurious. Sarah was simply enchanted by this amazing and innocent child, but our heroine was thinking that she would not want Mielle to find out about her embroidery lessons. She would probably start learning quickly too, and if the Count found out about it, he would not be able to accept her handkerchief, so she asked her mother to keep it all a secret. Arya was glad that her mother was on her side. And anyway, Mielle was initially bad at needlework, although by the age of 15, she had become proficient in it. But who knows how things could turn out if she found out right away. Arya had to be first in everything she did. She had to get her hands on everything Mielle could do. After some time, Sarah looked in bewilderment at what Lady Arya had done. She said that it was simply amazing. Examining the scarf, she said that it looked wonderful from all sides, even if she sold it. Arya was glad that the lady was skilled in embroidery, because she was able to teach her everything very quickly. In that case, Lady Sarah decided that if they were done with the scarf for her father, then today they could try something else, something more complicated. Our heroine at this point said that she had already thought about it and wanted to embroider a golden rose. Sarah even froze at this point. Soon she asked the lady if she knew what the pattern meant. Arya smiled and said that she knew it very well. In any case, she said that as far as she knew, it was the coat of arms of the Duchy of Frederick. Our heroine's target was Mielle's fiancé, whose name was Oscar Frederick. Mielle was head over heels in love with him, which is why she wanted to take revenge in this way. Sarah thought about it, because she knew that if anyone found out, rumors would spread about the engagement of the Duke and Lady Arya. However, at that very moment, she had a revelation that made her realize that Arya was in love with Mr. Oscar. Arya thought that she would take him away, but Sarah thought that this could not be allowed, because then they would talk even worse about Lady Arya. She could become disappointed and withdraw. The woman asked the lady in surprise if she really wanted to give it to Mr. Oscar. Our heroine asked in surprise who it was. The girl said that she thought their coat of arms was very beautiful, so she wanted to embroider it. Sarah seemed to breathe a sigh of relief at that very moment. It was actually cute how she was genuinely worried about our heroine. She is very kind, which is why she doesn't even suspect anything is wrong. In any case, the woman apologized for suddenly bringing up the topic and suggested that she try embroidering a rose, so she suggested that they sit closer. The action, meanwhile, takes us to the guy who was standing by the window and looking at the moon. At that moment, a woman entered the room and told Oscar that there was a terrible draft, which is why she advised him to step inside. The guy sighed heavily and told his sister that he would come to them now. The action moves back to the past. When Mielle was giving a gift to her father, the Count smiled and told his daughter that it was an incredibly beautiful embroidery. Mielle smiled and asked her father to always carry it with him. Compared to the superior Mielle, our heroine was an indecent simpleton. No one believed that she could compete in anything, and Arya took it all in stride. However, the action shifts back to the present. The Count sighed heavily, saying that the work was finally over. He assumed that he needed to find another occupation. Mielle asked her father why he didn't finance the tannery. The girl smiled and said that it was fashionable for noblemen to wear leather goods. For example, ladies really liked leather corsets. She thought it was a fresh idea. The man said he had heard that the demand for leather had increased the year before last, but it might be a good idea to fill that niche. Arya was shocked. Did she really talk such nonsense as a child? The funniest thing is that when our heroine was little, her sister seemed smart to her. She said it without even thinking. After all, even if leather was in high demand 2 years ago, who said it was still in fashion now? And we are talking about leather. Now they still don't know how to process it properly, and it's difficult to make clothes from it. Moreover, everything will end even before people stop wearing leather again. The problem was that if the leather was not treated correctly, it smelled bad. The girl asked her father if she could also speak out. The man was surprised that she was also interested in fashion. Our heroine said that she was very interested in it. She even heard that some nobles dilute their outfits with leather. But still, when they brought up the subject, she wondered. Was it certain that leather would last long on the market? The Count asked what she was talking about. The girl replied that as far as she knows, leather is harder to work with than it may seem. Because of this, it has not been as popular in recent years. She was worried about only one question. Is it possible to increase demand for something for which there was never really much demand? The man looked at his daughter in surprise and said that her remark was indeed fair, but Arya continued, saying that she had heard something else. As far as she had heard, the princess had recently gone on holiday to the north. One way or another, she had bought a lot of fur there. Rumor has it that a carriage filled with fur arrived at the palace. Furs come in a huge range of colors, are soft and odorless, and besides, what the princess wears cannot but be in demand. And since this is the choice of Her Highness, then in the near future, furs will be in fashion. The man immediately thought about it, because fur could certainly become fashionable, but right now the demand for it is very low, and it is not so easy to stock up on it. If he invests, then he needs to capture the market as quickly as possible. The Count asked where she had heard about it. Arya said that she had completely forgotten from whom exactly she had heard it, but the man asked her to think carefully. The girl began to pretend that she was thinking, but she hoped that her father would send someone to find out about this. The man did as she wanted, which was the right decision. If the information is confirmed, all the laurels go to her, and if not, then it will no longer concern her. In any case, no one will suffer a big loss. Our heroine smiled and apologized to her father because she still doesn't remember it very well. The man sighed heavily because for a moment he was seriously carried away by the little girl's words. At that moment, Mielle approached her father and said that she had recently found a hairpin that he had given her when she was little. The man laughed and said that pearl inlay was in fashion at the time. Even her brother smiled and said that the pin suited her very well. And in the blink of an eye, nostalgia hit the dinner table as everyone began to remember what fashion was like before. The action moves forward some time. The Count says goodbye to his family, saying that he will be leaving with his carriage. The man said he would be gone for a few days. Our heroine looked around and realized that her father had checked the information after all. He is indeed a real businessman because he prepared everything for the purchase of fur so quickly. Cain asked his father to be careful on the way, but Mielle asked him not to overwork himself. The man was about to turn around, asking his family to take care of themselves. But at that very moment, our heroine grabbed his hand. While the puzzled children watched everything that was happening, Arya told her father that she wanted to give him something. At that very moment, she held out a silk scarf with embroidery that she had done herself. The girl said that she was still just learning, so it didn't turn out so perfect, but she still thought that it would be a talisman for her father on a long journey. Our heroine was beaming with her smile and asking her father to be careful and to return safe and sound. Even Mother was shocked, because although she found silk, as she said, she did not expect such beauty. The Count, looking at this scarf in bewilderment, said that it was a wonderful gift. The man smiled and said he would treasure the scarf. Arya smiled and said she was very glad he liked it. Then the girl turned and said that she could embroider both for Mielle and for her brother Cain. But he immediately snorted and said that he did not need it. Our heroine mentally laughed at how prejudiced he was towards her. But still, he didn't give a damn. All our heroine wanted to see was Mielle's broken state. The girl said in a trembling voice that she didn't need anything either. Arya spread her hands and sighed, saying that she understood them. In any case, they finally said goodbye to the Count, who set off on his journey. The action moves forward some time. Arya was walking down the corridor when she suddenly heard a loud noise, and then someone's screams. These screams did not stop. Our heroine did not understand which tutor it was. Apparently, it happened after her demonstration of embroidery skills. Mielle remains dissatisfied with all the teachers, and she was the first to start learning embroidery, so the distance between them will continue to increase. However, the end of their story will also be completely different. Even if she is a child, she definitely feels everything. After some time, our heroine and her mother were sitting in nature and relaxing. The tea they were drinking had a wonderful aroma. The woman, raising a cup of tea, said that, judging by her daughter's successes, it was time to slowly look for a groom. Arya laughed and said that she was all of 14. The Countess sighed and said that girlhood was just a moment. At 30, she was still a mere child, and at that age, she had had a hard time. Arya couldn't even imagine how much she had to endure, pleasing other people in order to survive. Then she met a man who supposedly fell in love with her. However, he later abandoned her, and one baron turned away from her when he found out she had a daughter. Arya sighed and asked if it wouldn't have been easier to abandon her. The Countess replied that the baron would not have accepted her even if she had renounced her daughter. Then she often regretted that she had given birth, but in the end, everything was fine. And in any case, comparing a count who owns huge areas of land in the north of the country with some village baron is simply criminal. Our heroine, of course, was surprised, because with such a mother, one would not have been surprised by a sharp change in social status. Although in any case, she was infinitely grateful to her mother for not abandoning her when she brought her with her. And here she is, stupid, because she couldn't do anything when she was dying. However, at that moment, the woman decided to return to the main thing. The Countess smiled and said that Mielle, apparently, had her eye on the Duke's eldest son, Frederick. Our heroine asked in surprise if she was really talking about Oscar. The woman nodded and said that it was true. He was studying at the same academy as Cain, and Mielle had been asking for him to join them. The Countess thought about it and decided that the Duchy of Frederick and Rosente was certainly a very good union. And yet, the woman understood that there were 2 daughters in the county of Rosente. Arya laughed and said that this was a true observation. The woman turned to her daughter and said that she wanted her daughter to be the happiest. At that moment, the tea refill arrived, but our heroine mentally asked her mother not to worry, because she would definitely destroy Mielle, because human happiness lies in the misfortune of those who displease him. Soon things turned out so that Cain went to the academy, and Mielle spent all day learning to embroider in her room. Now there was no one in the palace to look at our heroine with disdain, and therefore she simply could not contain her glee. Sarah laughed and asked Arya if everything was okay. Our heroine smiled and told her that a lot of good things had happened lately, but the best of all was only one thing. Arya said that the best thing that happened to her was meeting Lady Sarah. From these words, the woman almost melted due to the excess of sweet words. But Sarah really helped our heroine a lot. Anyway, Sarah decided to continue the good news, saying that she had good news for Lady Arya. Of course, our heroine asked what happened. The woman said that in a few days, she would be holding a tea party for a small circle of her acquaintances, and she would like to invite Lady Arya. Our heroine remembered that the lady had extensive connections before her marriage. Sarah had said one way or another that she really wanted to show off Lady Arya to all her friends. Arya didn't know what to answer, which made Lady Sarah panic. She assured that only good people would be there, that the tea would be delicious. Didn't she really want to? Our heroine realized that the lady was calling her because of one rumor. The girl was so jealous of the Count's daughter that she tormented her every day. She was all like her mother, and it was obvious. This stray cat will definitely destroy the Rosenti family, but poor Mielle spends every night in tears. And now, in fact, it was all true. Even though it was in the past, it still remains true. Except, of course, for the last few phrases. But now it's time to make amends here too. So Arya decided to ask how she could show up at such a reception. Still, if Lady Sarah insists, she would like to know for sure if she can come. But in any case, she will be a little shy. The woman was only glad about this, so she said that everyone would be glad to see her. And since the invitation had been accepted, now it was time to choose the perfect outfit. As soon as our heroine opened the closet, she turned to Jessie, saying that she had a task. Looking at all her dresses, our heroine decided that they were childish, so she ordered to get rid of all these clothes. Even Jessie knew she shouldn't wear that, but the last Arya wasn't exactly fashion-forward. If you think back to the past, she had no idea how it was possible to dress so horribly for going out. She was one of those who didn't understand anything about fashion and wore everything. At this point, Jessie turned to the lady and said that there was information about the hourglass. Arya assumed that it had been repaired. The maid nodded her head and added that she could bring them back on the way back, just as she would take away the dresses. Our heroine thought for a while, and soon said that she would go herself, because she still needed to buy new clothes. It would be better for Jessie to prepare everything for her trip. The girl thought it would be better if no one else touched the watch. From now on, she would treat it especially carefully, because it had saved her. At this point, the maid, perplexed, told the lady that if they threw out all her clothes, she would have nothing to go out in. Only a couple of home outfits would remain. Our heroine realized that aristocrats did not go out in what they wore at home, but she still knew that she would not wear anything she had before. Our heroine knew there had to be another option, when suddenly she remembered Mielle's words, who said something about Arya's height. At that very moment, the girl turned to the maid and asked her to return all the clothes to the closet, and after that, she should go out for a short while. The woman soon walked out the door and began to think that lately she had felt awkward around Arya, because she had changed so much. And yet, it was still the same impulsive lady, so she breathed a sigh of relief. At this time, our heroine was looking for something that is usually used to light candles, and she actually managed to find it. She had matches in her hands. A moment later, a flame flared up and grew in a matter of seconds. The woman immediately ran into the room and took Lady Arya from there, asking if she was okay. At that very moment, panic broke out in the palace. All the maids began to carry water, and with great difficulty they managed to put out the fire. Our heroine cried and said that she just wanted to light a candle, but the match began to burn so quickly that she dropped it out of fear, and then everything caught fire and all the maids were horrified. They felt sorry for Arya. Our heroine turned to her mother and asked what she should do. However, the countess said that nothing terrible had happened, because she was still a child and the fire had been put out. Our heroine suddenly said that she wanted to go to the city, but all her clothes had burned. The woman thought about it and soon agreed with her daughter, saying that she definitely wouldn't be able to go anywhere looking like that. This meant that she needed to ask someone with the same body type for clothes. The countess thought that Arya had become more reserved lately, and she believed that she really didn't want to wear anything from her old wardrobe. And yet, Arya turned to Mielle. Our heroine asked for forgiveness, because she did not want to cause her inconvenience, but she still probably would not lend her one of her expensive outfits. Arya sighed heavily and said that if her sister didn't want to, she didn't have to force herself. She was ashamed, of course, but she could probably go out in her home clothes once. Our heroine turned around and, holding back tears, said that she would return very quickly because she did not want to disgrace their family, and no one knows her face anyway. The maid began to whisper in confusion. Arya, in turn, thought that if she had made a scene like before, their reaction would have been the exact opposite. Now she knew how to pull the right strings, which meant she wouldn't repeat the mistakes. Mielle nevertheless screamed and said that she would lend it, because clothes were just a trifle. The maids immediately broke into smiles, and our heroine cried out joyfully, thanking her sister for her help. Mielle said heavily that they were lucky to be of the same build. Our heroine, in turn, continued to smile and say that Mielle was simply like an angel. In just a couple of minutes, the girls were in Mielle's room. The sister smiled and showed her wardrobe and told Arya to choose what she liked. Our heroine began to look through the wardrobe, thinking that the dress she needed had to be somewhere here. And after some time of searching, the girl was finally able to find what she wanted. In front of her was a sealed box with the Frederick family crest on the lid. The girl told her sister that she would lend her the dress. Mielle, without even thinking, said that she didn't mind, but still decided to turn her head. At that very moment, the girl froze in horror and even began to stutter. Arya smiled, thinking that everything was right. This was the same dress that Oscar had given her last year. She treasured it so much that she never even wore it and eventually couldn't squeeze into it. Anyway, Arya added that it wasn't worth taking something very beautiful, so she took something simple. People began to whisper in confusion, saying that they had not seen the lady in this dress. Mielle, in turn, was trembling, because she had hidden this dress as best she could. But how did Arya find it? Arya added anyway that she still doesn't know much about clothes, and apparently she grabbed a very expensive outfit. She started apologizing for being so inconsiderate. In that case, she asked what she could borrow. The maids continued to spread rumors that Mielle apparently did not want to borrow anything. Noble, good, pious maiden, Rosente Mielle. Should she not now, in keeping with her image, show generosity? The girl reluctantly allowed the dress to be taken. Arya immediately said happily that she would be extremely careful and would return it very soon. Mielle replied that she would be grateful. Our heroine thought for a moment, because if she were even a little older, such a number would not have worked. It was good that she was still a child, because it is harder to refuse children. After some time, our heroine sat in the carriage in a new dress and thought that before the lily finally blossomed, it was necessary to destroy it from the roots. Looking out the window, our heroine thought that the one whose life was destroyed then in the square was not Arya, but Mielle. Thoughts take our heroine back to that fateful day when Mielle said that all this was part of her plan. She confessed that day that her sister's suffering was a real pleasure for her, and she would miss it. Shortly after this, the picture suddenly changes to a crow that was sitting on one of the signs in the city and screaming loudly. Our heroine at this time finally woke up and noticed that she had arrived in the city. With a heavy sigh, she calmed herself down after the nightmare and said that everything was fine. Soon she got out of the carriage and headed to one of the clothing stores. Today was going to be a long day. Our heroine at this point wondered, would the Count be surprised if she dressed too modestly? After all, thanks to her, he can earn a good amount of money, so he definitely won't like such an outfit. After thinking about it, our heroine decided that it was pretty good, and therefore it was worth doing. At that moment, the merchant was very worried and did not know what to say. Looking at the selection in the store, he said that they certainly didn't have the most exquisite things, but they would find something. Our heroine looked at these things in bewilderment and played the seller's words over and over in her head. A year earlier, even if she had eaten nothing and saved money for months, she would not have been able to afford even one such outfit. One way or another, the girl began to collect dresses according to her plan. The man, even in bewilderment, began to say that they had better things on the floor above. However, our heroine said that this would be enough for her, and also asked to pack everything. The woman nodded and asked to wait a little, and also offered her to treat herself to cookies. Arya, looking at the plate of cookies, thought for a bit, because she really wanted something like that then. Let alone some sweets, she didn't think she would ever be able to eat normal food. However, after just a few moments, the seller happily announced that the packaging was finished. Soon our heroine left the store and went on about her business. However, her attention was drawn to the joyful laughter of children. The children really did look happy. At that moment, a young voice came from behind the girl, saying that the newspaper was for rent for only 5 shillings per 10 minutes. It was possible to find out important information. The children ran happily to Hans, bewildered, asking if he sold newspapers. The boy said that he rented them out, because you can sell one newspaper endlessly. The girl's eyes lit up at that moment. She decided that it was very cool and was going to rent out newspapers too. Hans laughed and said that in that case, they would become competitors. By the way, from the past, this guy was a boy who occupied newspapers, and one day he was hit by a carriage, because of which he could not get out. Our heroine looked at this guy, and at the same time told Jessie that she needed to tell the boy and say that they were buying these newspapers from him and would pay in advance for the whole month. She also asked him to tell her that she would buy a newspaper from him every time he got a new one. The maid, of course, was surprised by the request, but said that she would fulfill it. The whole point was that for aristocrats, newspapers printed rather restrained and specialized information. However, in those newspapers that are intended for the common people, they still print all sorts of rumors and gossip. There were certainly some strange headlines like, "Where do people disappear to?" But there was also some truth. For example, that very case of buying and selling slaves in an underground casino, uncovered by the Crown Prince. Slavery is, after all, equivalent to owning cattle. Only the master can decide whether you will be killed or saved. And yet, in a country where slavery has been abolished, it was her brother and sister who brought her to the chopping block, calling themselves civilized people. Our heroine sighed heavily and laughed, because how could these civilized people be people if in fact they were noble hypocrites? By the way, about this article. Our heroine understood little about that life, but she remembers that people said how the prince dealt with this problem. Although the prince is a prince for a reason. Then she shook her head, thinking that she certainly wouldn't be able to gain the prince's patronage. Even when she was in her prime and going out into society, she never once saw the tip of his hair, which means that they live in completely different worlds. As soon as Lady Arya entered the shop, the merchant almost fell off his chair, but still said a few words and greeted the lady. Our heroine assumed he remembered her, since she used to come here to buy cheap trinkets when she was a beggar. In any case, she said she came for the hourglass. As soon as she clarified that they were being repaired, the man handed over the box and opened it. Inside lay the very same watch, whole and undamaged. Arya picked up the watch and began to examine it, assuming that it was in order, which meant that the old man really was a master of his craft. The girl said she was happy. He managed to fix them, even though they were broken into small pieces. Soon, our heroine asked Jessie to pay, and they gave the old man twice as much. Then, our heroine decided to look at various trinkets. She visited this shop quite often, which is not something she can say about boutiques. She felt a real nostalgia, which made her want to know what was new here. It can be said that she has transformed from a simpleton into a lady who has not yet settled into the role of aristocracy, but is trying her best. The girl had to become exactly like this in order to win over other nobles. However, at that very moment, Fear and trembling ran through the girl's entire body. She didn't understand what was happening because she wasn't even looking in the direction from which the pressure was coming from her head. Our heroine tried to stop it, but the fear grew more and more. At that moment, a knight approached the girl, touched her, and asked if she had finished her business and if they were returning back. Our heroine wanted to escape from here as quickly as possible, so, exhaling, she headed towards her carriage. She didn't know what it was, but she felt like she was in danger. She had just started her life anew, so there was nothing to threaten her life. Yet, even though she was in a hurry to get away from these suspicious people, she didn't know if it was because of nostalgia, or maybe it was all because she wanted to somehow thank the old man who had masterfully repaired the watch. She herself didn't notice what she had said. Turning her head one last time, our heroine advised the man to sell this ticket. The man didn't understand what she was talking about at first, but the girl pointed to the ticket, saying that he couldn't use it. It was the ticket for the very same auction in the underground casino. They lure people to them with gambling and auctions of all sorts of curiosities. In order to pay off the debts he got into to buy the ticket, the old man will close his shop. The man didn't understand what the lady was talking about, but our heroine just spread her arms out to the sides and said that the choice was his. Her job was simply to warn him. Of course, few people believe the vague words of a little girl, and she wouldn't believe it either. However, just before leaving, someone grabbed the princess and asked in bewilderment what all this meant. Our heroine didn't understand what was going on, but the guy kept asking his questions. He wanted to know why the lady told the old man about it. Arya looked into the eyes of the stranger, who was squeezing her hand so tightly, and she didn't understand why his eyes were so familiar. But the guy continued to insist and advised her not to pretend that she hadn't heard, otherwise he would have to use force. The girl was extremely perplexed that she had been grabbed so brazenly, which made her interest grow. And still, she was curious where he came from. By the way, even our heroine's knight was grabbed on the way out. However, at that moment, our heroine decided to turn her head and noticed a shocked seller behind the shop. She began to analyze what had happened. The guy grabbed her so abruptly that she was confused, but now she sees that even though he is tall, he is still a boy. Even if we take the highest figure, he would barely reach 20. But our heroine, by the way, was mentally 24 years old. This stranger threatens another with a sword. The skin is surprisingly clear, and she immediately began to be familiar and ask questions. If you put all this together, you get the picture that he is some kind of village aristocrat who has little understanding of the situation, is poor, and therefore decided to earn some money at the auction. And why did he react to her words like that? Her words were true on the one hand, but on the other, they didn't really add up. The guy suddenly asked the lady if she was too relaxed. Our heroine, in turn, calmly looked at him and said that he seemed to be more experienced in the matter than even her guards. Still, did he really think that such a fragile girl could escape from him if he let go of her hand? After all, he was squeezing her wrist too tightly. The girl advised him to let her go, and then she would tell him everything he wanted to hear. The guy asked her in confusion what she was talking about, to which the girl pointed to her already blue hand and repeated that it hurt. Did he really want to take her hand? The stranger abruptly pushed the girl's hand away and ordered her to speak about what he asked. Arya, in turn, although reluctantly, said that there are rumors that the casino is about to go bankrupt. Viscount Louvre is rumored to have been investing too recklessly in various things lately and is now in the red. He is said to want to close the casino and flee the country. Our heroine asked if what she said was enough for him, and if so, then she went. However, the guy stopped her and said that if she lied to him, she would pay for it. Soon he began to draw his blade. Arya laughed at this point and asked how he would know if she was lying or not. After thinking for a bit, the guy simply walked her to the exit, realizing that her words were also true. After some time, the girl's carriage began to move away, but the stranger continued to follow them. He immediately noticed that the carriage had the Rosente coat of arms. The guy also noticed that there was a brooch with a Frederick rose on the ribbon of the girl's dress. The assistant quickly assumed that this was Lady Mielle, because she was a potential bride for the son of the Frederick family. Although the count married again, and now there were 2 daughters in their house, he had only heard about the second one, that she was a terrible rude woman with no manners, so it was unlikely to be her. The stranger who grabbed our heroine began to remember her look, repeating the name, Mielle. The guy laughed, because in the ancient language, this name meant honey. A rather inappropriate name for her, and yet, for some reason, she seemed familiar to him. The assistant asked the guy if they needed to send someone to follow her, but he said it was enough that they knew who she was. They needed to deal with the casino first. The assistant asked what if the girl was just joking, since they were running out of time and had a lot of holes in their plan. The guy replied that it would be much worse if Louvre escaped. They would have to ask other countries for help, but if the operation simply fails, the consequences will be minor. Casinos are now the most popular. The guy was surprised, because it was the first time he heard anyone say that it could disappear. The assistant laughed and said that, to be precise, they would destroy it. But when? Without thinking twice, the prince replied that it would happen today. The boy, perplexed, caught himself and asked again. The prince added that they had about an hour to get ready. With a heavy sigh, the assistant nodded his head and said that he understood everything, so he would begin his preparations. Meanwhile, the action takes us back to the Duchy of Rosente. Our heroine was welcomed back. Arya smiled and thanked them, and also said that for the first time in a long time, she went somewhere and immediately got into trouble. In turn, the knights walking nearby sighed heavily, and one could say they were scared, because the lady would definitely fire them after such a disgrace. Our heroine was truly disappointed, because the knights not only failed to protect her, they didn't even try to do so. Before entering her chambers, she looked at them with an aggressive gaze, thinking that they were useless. Plopping down on the bed, she just wanted to ask her mother to throw them out without letters of recommendation, but it would do little good. And yet, if you think about it a little, it wasn't such a bad chance for her. Our heroine smiled and said that she hadn't been out for a long time, so she had completely forgotten how aggressive common people can be. It was good that she managed to get past. One of the knights caught himself and agreed with the lady in a trembling voice. The other knight hit him on the shoulder, trying to stop him. He started whispering in his ear and explaining that, with these words, Arya was telling them that they were incompetent. Our heroine, perplexed, told the knights that they had turned pale even faster than her hand had turned blue. By the way, it still hurt a little. The girl still said that the villain turned out to be quite strong, so she doesn't think they could help her. But pointing to her cup, the lady added that the water was too warm. Having started winking at the maid, our heroine asked in surprise who could bring her some cool water. The boys immediately came to their senses and started running for water, trying to please Lady Arya. Our heroine immediately started laughing at the two weirdos, after which she turned to Jessie and asked her to leave for a while in the same way. The girl continued to laugh all this time, but Jessie decided that the best solution for her would be to go and bring some delicious tea with sweets. As soon as everyone left the ladies' room, our heroine finally calmed down, and her joyful face changed to an indifferent one. At that very moment, she got out of bed, went to the wall, and took down the painting that was hanging there. The most unusual thing was that this wall had a mystery, because there was a mechanism hidden behind it. Our heroine opened the mechanism, after which she clicked the switch, and soon she was able to open the secret door. The girl was absolutely sure that today she was on the verge of losing. She needed to return the dress to Mielle as soon as possible. They are quite similar in height, hair, and eye color, so it is unlikely that he will immediately understand who she is. She knew how to outwit Mielle. She should tell her sister that someone in town called her dress very beautiful, and she will immediately start wearing it for days on end. So she will become a cover for our heroine. As soon as our heroine finished her business in the secret room, she returned to the bed to wait for the guys. A moment later, everyone ran into the room. Our heroine happily took both glasses, saying that her throat was so dry that she thought she was about to faint. And yet, she told the knights that she hoped for their continued service. The more time passed, the more she feared a future she could not control. She knew that stocking up on a couple of faithful dogs would definitely not be superfluous, and the boys were now grateful to the lady, which is why they were faithful to her. The action takes us to the prince, who at this time was just beginning his offensive. But by the next day, our heroine had successfully told Mielle that many people in the city had praised her dress, and that she had honestly told these people that the dress was not hers. Mielle, as it should have happened, immediately put on this dress, because she decided that she should become a full-fledged mistress. Our heroine was only glad that her sister was in such a mood. She should show off in it as much as she wants, and that's why she wanted everyone's suspicions to fall on her. At that moment, Sarah was talking about how there would only be 6 people at her tea party, including her and Lady Arya. The woman soon said that she thought the scarf would be just right for a gift. Our heroine looked at her in surprise and asked again. Sarah apologized sheepishly and said that she had already forgotten that this was Lady Arya's first tea party. She explained that usually at such events, ladies exchange some handicrafts, thereby strengthening the relationship. Our heroine knew that something similar should be practiced in the family, between women, but when she told her mother about it, she only laughed. And what about Mielle? Of course they would praise each other. Mielle would say that she put all her feelings for her sister into her scarf, but of course in reality it would be completely different. Mielle would only have threads as beautiful things, and she would advise Arya to go somewhere far away and forget herself. She thought that jewelry was the best gift, but she doesn't understand all this, so she has to follow the rules. Sarah suddenly said that she brought her a picture of the imperial coat of arms. Arya suddenly thought that if she had taken on this task anyway, she should have teased Mielle a little. Holding out a fancy scarf, the girl apologized that it hadn't worked out very well. Our heroine said that she wanted to give it to her as a gift, and she wanted them to become closer to each other. Mielle looked at this masterpiece in bewilderment and was as if in a stupor. Arya suddenly said that she had also heard that Mielle had started embroidering. She would like to see something finished. The lady suddenly panicked and started saying that there was nothing yet. The girl smiled and said that nothing terrible had happened, and that she could show what she could do later. Soon after, the girl went to her room. She thought that it would be cool if she remained so stupid until her death, but soon she would grow up and become smarter. Our heroine didn't even understand why she allowed such a child to set herself up with that jug. After that, Arya's whole life began to slowly go downhill, straight into the abyss. And yet, she was to blame for leaving him in the first place. There is no arguing about that. But it was Mielle who set it all up. Our heroine needs to be extremely careful to ensure that something like this never happens again. The girl decided that she should try to get closer to those aristocrats in order to expand her connections. And her new so-called puppies needed to be walked. The 2 knights bowed and greeted their mistress with trembling voices. Arya didn't understand why the knight was shaking so much. Even the new guard was looking at her sideways because of this guy, but there was nothing she could do about it. However, the girl happily said that the weather was just wonderful, so she asked where they were going. All she could do was smile dazzlingly and talk. She suddenly added that the tea party would be in the garden, so she was afraid it might rain. The girl definitely didn't want to see this hassle, but what happened, happened. One way or another, she sat inside, and the guards saw her off with a smile on their faces. And yet, while our heroine was heading towards tea drinking, inside her soul she had a bad feeling. However, when she arrived, the girl decided to attribute this premonition to ordinary paranoia. The girl got out of the carriage and started walking, thinking that everything was going as she had planned. Going deeper into the garden, our heroine saw all the ladies, and soon apologized, asking if she was very late. The girl introduced herself and said that she didn't know what to wear for such an occasion, so she was a little late, but she thought that the main character always appears last. It was all done just to get everyone to notice her modest outfit. Sarah was glad to see Lady Arya, so she suggested that everyone start. As if at the snap of a finger, maids began to approach the gazebo, carrying trays of delicious tea and treats. Our heroine looked around with admiration, and one of the ladies turned to Arya and suggested that it was her first time at a tea party. Arya smiled and said that it was indeed her first time at something like this, and the cookies and cakes were very beautiful. The girl was surprised that it was just a tea party, so there was no alcohol, but it was even interesting. But the ladies around began to whisper that the girl was not like they said about her. Our heroine did nothing but show off her knowledge of etiquette and sincere emotions from eating delicious desserts. The ladies were even glad that the rumors remained just rumors. After some time, the girl told about the fire in her room. Of course, if a little more, a bigger disaster could have happened, and yet she said that all her dresses were burned, and she doesn't know much about boutiques. She only knows the ones she dreamed of getting into when she was a commoner. Since she had no money, she could not visit them, so she was very happy to be in the boutique and buy some clothes. The lady was asked about Mielle in surprise. Our heroine responded to this by saying that she simply cannot bother her sister. She is a little ashamed to talk about one fact, but still, her origin is different. She accidentally became an aristocrat. A lady in the circle suddenly said that Mielle could have brought it up first. Arya asked in confusion if she had made it sound as if it was all her sister's fault. She explained that this was not what she had meant. In any case, she began to apologize, assuming that she had spoiled everyone's mood. All the ladies began to calm her down. Our heroine soon waved her hand and said that she was really looking forward to the opportunity to chat with her peers at tea. As a token of her gratitude, she asked him to accept her gift, even though it was a mere trifle. She also suggested that they talk about something else. However, all the girls began to look at these beautiful scarves in bewilderment. Arya smiled and said that it was all thanks to the teacher Sarah. Seeing the ladies' glances, our heroine was glad, because after her touching story, they were all truly interested in her. All these little things take up a lot of time. They are quite boring and she really doesn't want to do them. But when she thinks about what Mielle did, her motivation gains strength. However, our heroine was also interested in who was the patron of Mielle's sister. Arya should have reached her first in order to cut off Mielle's path to the top. At this time, the ladies were surprised to say that the scarves were too beautiful for a 2-week embroidery experience. Sarah was happily saying that Lady Arya was a very capable student. Our heroine smiled and said that if they liked it so much, she could do more at the next meeting. The ladies were surprised and asked if it would be too much trouble. The girl told them that it was her only hobby, so she would only be happy. One of the ladies suddenly said that, as a return gift, she could take her to a boutique. Discussions about the plan for the walk immediately began, but one of the ladies asked in surprise if it was dangerous on the streets now. Our heroine immediately realized that something had happened. The other ladies, perplexed, began asking what had happened. Of course, it was about the Viscount of Louvre. He was trafficking people in an underground casino, and this same man is on the run, so the situation is quite dangerous. That's why it wasn't worth going out anywhere. Even though the famous crown prince was involved in this matter, he let it slip, and everyone is only talking about it. Our heroine, hearing all this news, was in incredible shock. The ladies continued to chatter, saying that if the prince found out about this when he returned to the palace, all the gossips would be brought to justice. And yet, all this time, Arya could not comprehend what had happened. The Viscount of Louvre, as she had said, had somehow escaped, which meant that the prince's operation had failed. But why? The girl hoped that this matter had nothing to do with her, and she also hoped that it would not interfere with her revenge. At that moment, Lady Sarah, who saw the fear in Arya's eyes, said that everything would be fine and that she was safe. After some time, the tea party was drawing to an end. All the girls began to disperse, saying that they would definitely have to meet again. Our heroine reassured herself that there shouldn't be any problems, but her anxiety didn't subside. She soon decided that she should keep her puppies occupied. At that moment, she approached a guard named John and addressed him, saying that she had a task for him. The girl told him to stand up and carry out the mistress's order without any delay. After a while, the action moves to the night city. Sighing heavily, the guy said that this simply cannot continue. The guy asked everyone he saw, but one after another said that he knew nothing. John replied that if he was still young, he was still quite responsible. He assumed that His Highness clearly hadn't failed his. At that moment, the guy interrupted him and said that he needed to go on patrol. The guy also warned John and advised him not to dig under His Highness. John almost cried, because his friend cares about him very much. The only problem was that the lady promised that if he didn't find out anything, it would be the end for him. The guy searched the entire area, everything he could see, even the trash cans. But there were still no clues. However, at that moment, he came across the very shop where our heroine was. The puzzled merchant looked out of the door and asked how he could help. The boy replied that he had something to ask him, and if he answered, he would give him 50 shillings. This sum was big, so the old man agreed, but still fear and mistrust were visible in his eyes. John, perplexed, asked not to be nervous, because he had already been here to him. The guy reminded that he came to the shop with the lady whose hourglass he repaired. The man immediately opened the door and invited the guy in. He said that on the lady's advice, he sold the ticket to the auction and returned the borrowed money. John was even glad about this, so he congratulated the old man. The merchant in turn handed over a drink and asked in surprise if the lady hadn't come. The guy just took a couple of sips and said that it was a personal matter for him, but soon fell silent. The reason was that in the blink of an eye, he fell onto the bar counter and fell asleep. Soon, some more people approached the sleeping John. One of them told them to look at the guy's face. It turned out that it was the work of the Crown Prince's company. One of the assistants said that the knight's name was John, and that they were once in the same knightly company, but now he works for Rosente. The prince instantly remembered this family name, because the girl, whose name is Mielle, according to his memory, is also from this family. And yet he forgot a lot about the girl in pursuit of the Louvre. At this point, the merchant turned to the prince and reminded him of the reward for information. Having placed a certain ticket on the table, the prince ordered his men to find out about Count Rosente and how he was connected with the Louvre. Then they looked at the sleeping John and asked in surprise what they should do with him. The prince spread his arms and said that it was better to just leave him. After all, the more he leaves behind, the easier it is to catch him by the tail. Soon someone burst into the room, saying that he had found something. Under cover of night, the prince's detachment decided that it was time to move out immediately. But after a while, the action takes us to the morning, when our heroine has just woken up. Of course, at this time, John arrived in her chambers with the information he had found. Our heroine sighed heavily and told him that he could go. She also added that he should not come until she herself calls him, so it is better to go to Mielle and stay close to her. The guy asked again in bewilderment, to which our heroine nodded her head and asked if he remembered her assignment. John replied that no one had yet asked the lady's name, but in any situation, he understood that it was necessary to mention only Madame Rosante. In that case, our heroine told him to go and carry out her order. The guy thanked the lady and left the chambers, slamming the door. Lady Arya was still confused, because he was too useless. He went all the way to the casino, but he couldn't find any information. Just yesterday, Louvre was captured at the nearest inn, and she found out everything even without connections. Our heroine even wondered if John was really that stupid, or if he was just lying to her. In any case, she decided that it was enough that she sent him away. Arya sighed heavily, because she understood that the Viscount was caught in any case, which meant that everything returned to normal. That was why it was time to get back to her plan. Today, she planned to continue sharpening and polishing her weapon. Mother told her daughter that she was leaving soon, so she advised her to hurry. Arya said that she just wished she would hire a few tutors for her. The woman was very surprised by her daughter's request, because she had recently said that she did not want to. She had changed too much lately. In any case, the Countess asked her daughter if she already had someone in mind. Our heroine replied that she would like to study basic sciences, history, and culture. The girl understood that she would achieve little in high society with embroidery alone, so it was time to expand her connections. The woman said that it would hardly be of much use, although it was exactly the same with Lady Sarah, and she clearly did not understand people. Arya only smiled. This list included women looking for a match for their sons to raise the status of the family. She certainly knew what was needed, because she was going to do something interesting. She needed a woman who would want to tie her to her sons at any cost. That way, she would get a good support. Arya insisted on these ladies. The woman sighed heavily, saying that the choice left much to be desired, but it would do for a start, and since that was her daughter's wish, there was nothing she could do. Arya continued to smile sweetly, but she was getting a little nervous that her mother was trying to figure everything out, although at the same time, it was this mother's trait that saved her many times. Soon our heroine met Lady Celine White. Lady Arya laughed and introduced herself, saying that she entrusted herself into her hands. The action takes us back to the past, when our heroine was told that his mother wanted him to marry a lady from a good house. Arya asked again in bewilderment, and the guy answered that this was his mother. She always demands to find a good match. Our heroine didn't understand what he was talking about, but this woman had married him to a girl from another clan. Although she had no intention of marrying him, he was surprisingly serious. The girl believed that all mothers wanted the same thing, so she decided to put these thoughts aside. Lady Celine said that if you add 1 cookie to 3, it will become 4, which means that 3 plus 1 equals 4. The woman soon said that this was their first meeting, but it was enough to understand that all those vile rumors were lies. Since she started training very late, she would help as much as she could. Our heroine laughed, telling the teacher that she would have to help a lot. The woman smiled shyly and asked to call her by name, because it would be more convenient. Arya asked how she, as her student, could treat her like that. She didn't have to treat Celine like Sarah, so she could stop pretending to be nice. But still, the girl tried so hard to look good in their eyes that she was incredibly tired. And although the lessons themselves were useful for our heroine, she learned a lot. Without ever studying history or culture, she smiled sweetly, thinking that all these ladies could continue to try in the same spirit, to please all their sons, to see her as a beautiful doll, and she would not even give them a chance. Our heroine's goal was still Oscar, and only to spite Mielle. Our heroine was obliged to steal it, so she had to work hard. The real food for Arya was not food, but the flower of her sister Mielle. At this point, Sarah was surprised and told the girl that she was wrong, but she still smiled. What happened? Our heroine responded in surprise that they had simply hired tutors for her, but how did Sarah understand this? In any case, the girl said that she, like in her lessons, is happy that she can learn something new, because it is interesting. Sarah assumed that the new tutors are good people. Arya laughed and decided to admit that they were all a little funny. Sarah smiled and said that they were right to be so happy, because Lady Arya was a capable and affectionate student. Our heroine looked at Lady Sarah and realized that she was a beautiful woman, so it was no wonder that she melted the heart of that cold marquise. Her handkerchief was just a pretext. At that moment, Arya told the teacher that despite all the tutors, the only one who was the best for her was Sarah. The girl immediately began to hug the lady, and Sarah, with a smile on her face, told the girl that she really liked her too. Arya said that she hopes that Sarah will meet a wonderful man, and she will be very happy with him. Of course, the main thing is that, at the same time, they become a solid support for her. And yet, Sarah was the best, because she was so sweet and easy to fool. The action moves to the next day, when Mielle was sitting at the table and could not even say a word. Our heroine immediately assumed that her sister was still having trouble with her embroidery, or that she was worried that someone was constantly coming to Arya. In any case, Mielle's exhausted appearance filled our heroine's heart with happiness. After a while, Arya plopped down on her bed, thinking that her sister was writing another letter to Cain. But her brother could only console her in writing, because he was also stuck in the dorm. Our heroine was going to accumulate more knowledge and influence, and then just ruin her sister's plans and engagement to Oscar. She would make her go through what she went through. And yet the girl was incredibly happy, and wondered what else good the coming day had in store for her. At that moment, the girl looked out of the window and noticed that it was very noisy in the garden, which meant that someone might be coming to them. Our heroine immediately turned to Jessie and asked her to go and find out what kind of guest had arrived. Arya knew it wasn't the Count, because he usually notified when he came home, and it was a day off, so it wasn't the tutors. Who were they? After a while, our heroine shuddered, because the alarm clock rang, and she didn't even notice how she dozed off. As soon as she stood up, she caught herself thinking that she wanted to eat. And in general, when you get used to the life of a nobleman, you start to want to eat much more often. Arya soon walked out the door, and was surprised because Jessie still hadn't returned, which probably meant she hadn't slept much. She should have asked for another maid. And yet it was very quiet in the palace. Only the clatter of shoes could be heard along the corridor. Finally, our heroine reached the steps and began to descend, where the maid was waiting for her. And at that very moment, as soon as Arya looked at Mielle, she understood that even if she hadn't heard Jessie calling her that, she would have recognized this secret guest at one glance, who arrived at the castle with the young Duke Cain. Oscar Frederick stood on the threshold. This was a shock for our heroine, because he was supposed to come for a visit much later. Could it be that the sisters' letters brought this moment closer? Arya was certainly taken by surprise, as she was in her home clothes. The girl reluctantly greeted Oscar. Mielle noticed her sister trying to do something, so she immediately turned to Oscar. The girl began to smile sweetly and say that as soon as she found out that he was coming, she immediately asked to prepare a dinner according to his preferences. Oscar was extremely grateful for this. However, our heroine was very angry. She turned to Jessie and ordered her to prepare the dress and also to do her hair. Our heroine understood that the course of events had simply sped up a bit, but she already knew what to do next. Soon the action takes us to the dining room. Mielle tried to keep up the conversation, but at that moment she was interrupted. Of course it was Arya who said she had been waiting, but no one had called her, so she decided to go down herself. The girl asked if she would disturb them. Mielle was shocked by her sister's outburst, no less than Oscar Frederick, who immediately came to his senses. The guy, perplexed, began to apologize, saying that they had forgotten about it, most likely because of his sudden visit. He immediately ordered the maids to bring the cutlery. Our heroine immediately broke into a smile and sat down next to her sister, because this was undoubtedly a great chance for her. At this point, Oscar decided to show interest in his interlocutor, so he introduced himself, saying that this was their first meeting. Arya smiled back at him and said that she was very glad to meet them. Soon the girl looked at her sister and was horrified. She noticed that Mielle was pale, so she asked if everything was okay. The girl, perplexed, answered that everything was fine. After these conversations, our heroine thought, realizing that the past Arya was too ridiculous. The Count, who brought a naive and obedient wife into the family, his son, who immediately hated his younger half-sister, and also Mielle, who was the source of all the dirt for Arya. It was she who allowed this vile race to destroy her unfairly, which means the previous Arya was terribly stupid if she didn't see all the signals. Arya suddenly noticed that the princes were in the middle of their studies, and they had come all this way. Oscar replied that he was bored within the dorm walls, and Kane suggested that they go together. Our heroine smiled and said that her brother was certainly full of surprises, but in any case, she wished him a good rest before returning. At that moment, tea was brought, and Arya wanted to say something else, but Mielle reacted instantly and got ahead of her sister. The girl laughed and said that, although she was saying this belatedly, she was still grateful for the dress that she had been saving and had only worn for the first time today. Mielle suddenly said that she would like to give him a suit in return, and Kane picked up on this and suggested going to a boutique. Oscar, surprised, replied that he did not need a new suit. The guy explained that he had a responsible person and that he didn't need a uniform for the academy either. He suggested that Mielle and Kane go together since he needed to update his wardrobe. Mielle started to say that they couldn't leave their guest alone, but the guy said something unbelievable. He replied that he wasn't alone here because Lady Arya was here. The girl's face changed in an instant. Arya and Oscar began exchanging words, coming to the conclusion that they would not violate the rules of etiquette if Arya remained in the palace. Mielle tried to add something, but Arya stood up abruptly and told Oscar that he should rest if he felt tired, and she would help her family get ready for the boutique. Oscar stood up from the table and thanked Milady for her concern, and also wished Mielle and Kane a good trip. After some time, our heroine returned back to her room with a small victory. Instantly the girl began to dance, which was surprising, but still her body itself began to dance. At this point, Jessie turned to the mistress and asked what she should do with the handkerchief, to which Arya asked to give it to her, and then the maid could be free. Our heroine prepared this scarf just in case, but its time has not yet come. She didn't know when Mielle might give Oscar the scarf, so she decided to keep the scarf on her person. It was funny that Kane and Mielle had no choice but to go. They can't tarnish their good name, because even they have to have a drop of shame. Soon, Arya lay down on her bed and picked up a book, thinking that she better slow down and get ready for her lessons. After all, she already had everything in her favor. This history book was about ancestors she had met at balls in the past, and all these bastards were made out to be heroes here. A wise system in which murderers and thieves rule over everyone, and that is the whole aristocracy. They didn't care about anything, as long as their bellies weren't empty. But our heroine was the same. As soon as her social status changed, she started throwing money around. the same as all those who didn't care about the opinions of others, and especially those of lower status. Understanding this, the girl even felt terrified, because looking back, she didn't want the same thing. With a heavy sigh, the girl decided that she had had enough of lessons, which meant she needed to go get some fresh air. She decided to choose a winter garden as the best place for this, and she certainly made the right choice. Although my mother had lost all interest in the garden, the servants still took care of it, and the garden was another exquisite hobby for the Countess. By the way, the girl immediately noticed that it was very hot here, and so she asked herself a question. If I water the flowers with cool water, will it get better? She decided to grab the watering can and start watering the flowers anyway. There was no point in torturing herself with unnecessary worries, and she should have fully enjoyed what was happening, because she didn't want to ruin her mood over some nonsense. Looking at the door, she noticed the plants above it and decided that she would water them there too and return home with renewed strength. At that moment, the girl climbed up and rose as high as she could, but she couldn't reach it. And anyway, if she decided to do something, she would do it. She was going to see it through. All her plans had to be perfect. So the girl started to reach closer and closer. And so, finally, she began to turn over the watering can, but did not calculate that at that moment someone might come in. Arya ended up pouring water on the person who came to her. The girl didn't even have time to understand what had happened, but in bewilderment, she asked to at least warn whoever was coming in. As soon as she got down, she noticed to her horror that she had poured water on Mr. Oscar's head. Our heroine immediately began asking the guy if everything was okay with him. The girl apologized for what she did, because she didn't see anyone coming in. Arya continued to panic in confusion, but at that moment, Oscar came a little closer and addressed Milady. Taking her hands, he asked her to calm down, saying that everything was fine, but she would get wet too. The girl told him that she was perfectly fine, but Oscar pointed out that if she continued to close the distance, things would not be so good. Our heroine looked at herself and actually noticed that she was wet. Arya was incredibly confused and had no idea how she had screwed up so badly. She kept saying that she was so sorry, and yet she understood that if her whole plan failed because of such nonsense, then she would simply— Almost immediately, the girl decided to distract herself from stupid thoughts. She looked at the gentleman and did not understand why he was walking around someone else's estate without servants, if he was just a guest here. Moreover, he told her that he was going to go to rest because he was very tired. At this point, the guy turned to the lady again and asked her not to blame herself. Suddenly, he said that he was also guilty of wandering around the place without permission. Our heroine was incredibly happy that he understood this too, but she couldn't hold back her tears. At that moment, the guy looked at Milady in surprise and asked if she was really crying and why. Arya was taken aback by the question and didn't know what to say. She should probably say it was just the heat. And yet, looking at the guy who felt guilty, she finally understood what he really was. Arya seemed to read him like an open book and realized that he was a kind person who couldn't leave a person in trouble. Most likely, that's why he intervened during lunch. Now, the most important thing was clear. His weakness, which she did not know about then, was clear. One way or another, our heroine smiled and told the gentleman that she was not crying. Suddenly, the girl turned around, saying that she had completely forgotten about one thing. She had a handkerchief in her pocket. Looking at Oscar, the girl said that she was completely confused, so it flew out of her head. But still, she asked to accept him. Just now, our heroine was thinking that luck had turned away from her, but now her chance was before her again. Oscar certainly knew what it meant to accept a handkerchief from an aristocrat, but he couldn't refuse in their position, especially looking into such innocent eyes. Of course, the guy took the handkerchief and began to wipe away the water that was on his jacket. However, at the moment when our heroine was happy that he accepted the handkerchief, the guy focused his attention on something. His gaze fell on the embroidery, which was hard to miss. Arya suddenly said that she liked the Frederick crest so much that she decided to embroider it. It was funny that he was the first guest she had ever met, so she remembered about this handkerchief and found it, and if it could be useful to him, she would be very glad. And yet she immediately apologized if he was offended by her using their coat of arms for embroidery. Only the guy continued to look and say that everything was fine. Arya knew that noblewomen expressed their affection by giving scarves, and that returning such a scarf to a girl was tantamount to an insult. Our heroine was very cunning, because she knew that the heir of the Frederick family would never break the rules of etiquette. The guy just at that moment turned to Arya and asked if he could take the scarf for himself. Our heroine, of course, was expecting just this request, so she smiled and nodded her head. Soon the lady would turn to Jessie and ask her to prepare a bath, as well as all the necessary accessories. Then she turned to the guest and asked if he had any spare clothes. Oscar sheepishly replied that they had been too hasty in getting ready for the trip. However, he had already ordered his servant to bring him a change of clothes, since in uniform, he would not be able to get a good rest anyway. And immediately, our heroine understood why the guy was without a servant. In any case, soon Jessie invited them inside. Before leaving, Oscar apologized for causing unnecessary worry about him. Arya bowed and said that everything was fine, and also wished him a good rest. Our heroine also turned around and went about her business, and now all that was left was a small matter. Now the girl could only hope that he would give her a return gift. The action moves to the evening. The guys were sitting at the table again, and finally, Oscar broke the silence by asking Kane how their trip went. The guy smiled and said that everything had worked out quite well, and they had even brought a gift for him. Oscar asked in surprise, was it really for him? They handed him the box, and as soon as they opened it, the boy noticed 3 feather tips. Kane explained that his nibs were quite old, so it was time to upgrade them. Oscar sighed and asked Lady Mielle to accept his thanks. The girl immediately said, embarrassed, that she had heard that he needed them, and therefore decided to give him something in return. Kyan laughed and told his friend that it was his gift too. Oscar told him that he had only given the gift, so he was thanking only Milady for her care. Mielle continued to smile broadly, and our heroine even felt a little disgusted. Looking at what was happening at the table, she even felt annoyed to interfere in such an idyll. Our heroine immediately wondered, should she start a conversation about the headscarf and thereby destroy this atmosphere? Almost instantly, she decided that it was worth enduring, because there was no way to convey what was on Arya's mind so that everyone would understand. The girl decided that it would be better to try everything else for now, and besides, Oscar was like this throughout the entire dinner, which means he might be interested in our heroine. Although, on the other hand, he could simply feel sorry for her, looking at how broken she was. Soon the guy decided to ask if everything was okay with Lady Arya. Our heroine was incredibly happy that he was going to meet her halfway. The guy asked if it was worth calling a doctor. This meant that he still felt sorry for her. In any case, the girl smiled and said that everything was fine, and now she even felt embarrassed that she was making him worry. She asked him to ignore her and continue eating, but Oscar insisted that if she felt sick, it would be better to speak up right away. At that moment, their conversation was interrupted by a fork, which fell to the ground for the umpteenth time that day. Our heroine asked in surprise if she had knocked over a clean fork. Mielle, who seemed to be broken, sheepishly apologized for this. Soon the day of departure arrived. Oscar, before leaving, said that he was able to have a good rest thanks to them, but still, he had to take his leave. After some time, our heroine's mother burst into her room, saying in utter bewilderment that she had heard that Oscar had arrived. Arya replied that he had stopped by for a short while, but where was Mother? The woman said that she had gone shopping in a neighboring country, but now was not the time. The mother smiled and asked Arya how she liked Oscar, to which the girl replied that there was nothing special about him. The woman sighed heavily and became upset, because it seemed to her that this was a great chance. And still, she was very sorry that she was absent during his visit. But Arya thought that there was definitely nothing to regret, because she had not missed her chance. The action moves forward some time. A representative of the Frederick family arrived and presented gifts, saying that everything for them was from the Frederick house. All the people started whispering. They assumed that this was a return gift for Mielle, which meant that the feelings were even deeper. Everyone was curious about what was inside, but the girl asked, embarrassed, why he had given her anything in return. However, at that moment, the man began to read Mr. Oscar's instructions, and our heroine was going down the stairs at that time. But she didn't miss anything. Moreover, she arrived on time. because at that moment the man said that the box with the red ribbon was intended for Lady Mielle. There was also another box, a box with a blue ribbon, which, as you might guess, was intended for Lady Aria. The smile instantly disappeared from Mielle's face, and she turned her head towards her sister. Mother smiled, saying that Mr. Oscar must have been pleased with Aria's reception. Our heroine said that it would be nice if it were so, and yet it seemed to her that this was simply a gift in return for the scarf she had given him. Hearing these words, Mielle was in incredible shock, as were all those present, who began to whisper. Anyway, the woman approached a representative of the Frederick family and asked if there was a letter. The man suddenly realized that he had the letter. He even laughed, saying that he didn't understand why they gave him 2 letters. In the end, both Lady Aria and Lady Mielle stood next to their gifts with letters written by him. The mother turned to her daughter and asked in surprise what interesting things they were writing to her there. Even Mielle said she was curious about what was in the letter addressed to her. Our heroine smiled and asked what could be special about her letter. She suggested that it would be more interesting to listen to Mielle's letter. The sister began to feel embarrassed again. She replied that according to seniority, Aria should be first, but our heroine still insisted. She reminded him that she was the one who was predicted to be his bride, so it would be more interesting to listen to the passionate love letter. And yet she decided to give in. Mielle said that she would read it first, and then she should read Aria. However, at this moment, our heroine began to laugh, saying that her mother had simply decided to tease them, and she had taken everything so seriously. The woman was surprised, and even though she said that she was really interested, our heroine still asked her sister if it was possible to just read Mr. Oscar's letters in front of everyone. Starting to walk forward, the girl said that this was at least disrespectful, so it was better to close the topic. And since we were talking about this, it would be more interesting to look at their gifts. While Mielle stood there as if spellbound, our heroine turned to her maid and asked her to open the boxes. Our heroine felt how murderously Mielle was looking at her from behind her back. After all, this was her personal maid, Emma, I think. As soon as she opened the box, a beautiful set of a dress, shoes, and a hairpin began to appear in front of her. The mother laughed and told her daughter that she had not dressed up properly for a long time, so she offered to put it on. But Aria replied that she would be late if she did not hurry. In that case, she said she would just take the hairpin and go. So it was time to say goodbye. Smiling, she said she was very sorry she wouldn't be able to see Mielle's gift. Our heroine began to move away, and Mielle stood in place, clutching the letter in anger. The action takes us to the carriage, where our heroine decided to read her letter. Oscar really did send her a return gift for the handkerchief he lent her. He wanted to express his gratitude and asked not to refuse the gift. Well, it was a rather laconic message. Although it was predictable, if she had read it in front of everyone, she could have dispelled the misconceptions that had arisen. But it was precisely through these delusions that she had to squeeze out all that she could squeeze out. She soon laughed, wondering how pathetic Oscar thought her clothes were, to the point of sending her a dress as a return gift. Anyway, she didn't think that everything would turn out like this. But thanks to him, everything turns out even better than she expected. Our heroine suddenly turned to Jessie. The girl asked what was better, a ring, a pendant, or a brooch. She would like to stop by the most prestigious jewelry store on the way back. Jessie, at this point, surprisingly, responded coldly and said that they would do as the mistress ordered. Our heroine did not understand what had happened to her, but most likely the maid thought that she wanted to spend money on herself, like before. She immediately wondered if the money they had taken with them would be enough, since she couldn't give Mr. Oscar something simple. The woman immediately came to her senses and said that she was right. Jessie replied that they hadn't really taken much, but a lady of her position could make do with a receipt. Aria was glad that she could give a worthy return gift. Our heroine was no longer stupid as before. She was now the one who would free the unfortunate girl, who was trying with all her might to hide her rotten nature from a life completely woven from lies. After some time, the ladies admired the hairpin, which was very beautiful. Our heroine smiled and thanked them for the compliments. Soon she said that she tried to embroider the coat of arms of their houses. The ladies, perplexed, said that this time the gift was even more beautiful. One of the girls even said that she had told about Lady Aria and would like to invite her to her place. Our heroine was glad to hear this and she is extremely grateful to them for this. And yet this technique was of no use, so our heroine was very tired. She couldn't miss the appointment because of Sarah anyway, but here she only made useless acquaintances. It was very annoying. Suddenly, our heroine stopped, because at that moment she realized something. Turning around in surprise, she looked at the guy and asked who he was. She was talking to their coachman, who was not the same, so she wanted to know what happened. The man replied that he had a stomachache, so he switched. Arya asked in confusion if the man who had come all the way to the estate had simply changed. He began to get confused and say that it wasn't quite like that. The girl asked how the coachman could leave without her permission. The man became even more nervous, which is why Arya ordered him to be identified. The knight grabbed the man and said that he was elect, and that he had worked at the estate for over 30 years and was about to retire. This only means that this man is still their servant. The man suddenly fell down and began to restrain himself. Arya only asked why she was not informed. The girl asked in surprise. Would the man have remained silent if she hadn't noticed? Is this really how they treat their mistress? The girl was incredibly angry, so she kept asking the same question. What would have happened if she had just gotten into the carriage? If Arya hadn't noticed this, everything could have ended very badly. After all, our heroine had already fallen for Mielle's tricks before, when she sent her fake servants. Her sister could do something like that at any moment, and it would be just like her to bring fools close to her to put her life at risk. Our heroine was confident that Mielle clearly had no plans to disappoint her as a villain. After all, compared to the previous trivial bullying, she started to play bigger. As fast as Arya progresses, so fast she starts to show her essence. Soon, the girl ordered to take the carriage and leave for the estate, and also to say that she would soon return home. The man got into the carriage and headed out as ordered, but he visibly darkened when she told him to go back. With him, the carriage shook in all directions, which made it feel like it was about to fall apart, and this only further confirmed Arya's fears. Our heroine turned her head and told John to find the carriage. They didn't even notice the change of coachman, but she hoped that at least they would be able to find the carriage. What was funny was that the guards didn't notice what was right under their noses, and yet they were still unhappy doing the footman's job. And although our heroine was going to ignore the option that all the troubles were due to her origin until the very end, she could no longer lose sight of it. Soon the girl entered the shop and said that she wanted to look at the brooches. The man immediately said that he would take her to the waiting room. Arya immediately specified that she needed a brooch that would suit a young man a little over 15 years old, and also asked to show all the designs, both luxurious and modest. Jesse was a little tense at this point, but the seller said he needed a little time. The man whispered to his assistant not to bring anything ordinary, only high-class goods. He could tell from the servants' faces whether the gentleman had money. This particular maid reacted calmly, as did her mistress, which meant they did not care about the price. Looking at Arya, the man said that this noblewoman was clearly not an ordinary one. After a while, he apologized for the wait. The man arrived with a cart of jewelry. Pointing at them, he said that he had found only the most valuable pieces of jewelry from his shop. Arya was suddenly surprised, because they looked pretty good, and there was something to compare them with. She had seen a lot of things in high society, but these brooches looked luxurious. She asked to include the brooch, because the person she was giving it to wore mostly dark clothes. Of course, the seller didn't mind, so our heroine started trying it on, but she didn't really like something. The girl changed her style and color, and immediately began to look much more interesting. However, the main question was whether Oscar would like this brooch. Arya was happy, because now the guy will be in a hopeless situation again, and it's great. The girl smiled and said that she will take this brooch. She also said that she would like a few more brooches of her own design. The main thing is that they should be eye-catching at a small size and should look something like this. The man was shocked, because when he saw the design, he realized that it was the coat of arms of the Rosenti house, and she was the heroine of those nasty rumors. But she was not at all what he imagined her to be. If the rumors were to be believed, the girl was supposed to be the devil tormenting Lady Mielle, but she was different. The man took the drawing and asked how many brooches were needed. The girl replied that 5 would be enough for her to start with. The seller immediately replied that it would take a day, which was even faster than Arya thought. She asked to send everything with what she bought today. The man also asked if he needed to send postal paper. Arya smiled and said that she was just about to ask. Soon the seller said that tomorrow morning they would send all her things to the estate, and he also took out a box. Opening it, he said that it was a small gift for Lady Arya from him, and he hoped that she would like it. Our heroine was only happy to see such savvy people. The girl tried it on and thanked for the gift. Soon she asked in surprise if the man was the owner of this store, to which she received a positive answer. Arya replied that she would definitely drop by again. The action moves forward some time. Our heroine's servant stood silently, and a strange atmosphere of silence hung in the air. However, our heroine decided to dispel this silence, so she turned to the guy and told him to find a carriage. The guy asked again in surprise, but our heroine was definitely not joking. With her aggressive look, she ordered him to go, and as quickly as possible. Jessie stood up at that moment and said she was going to be gone for a while. She wanted to ask for more tea and sweets. Arya told her not to come back until everything was ready. Arya was glad that the maid was smart, because she almost lost her temper like before. The coachman changed suddenly. The inattentive knights were replaced by the slow ones. Soon the girl went to the window, because she decided that she should breathe some fresh air and watch the calm evening. She looked down and realized that she had worn clothes like this before, if not worse. There was no way to call their situation normal, because Mom invested everything in herself, as in a commodity. And yet, thanks to this, they entered the Count's family. To grow up in a ditch, only to get out of it, only to get a chance at a good life. Our heroine looked at the sunset and told herself one thing. She definitely won't let herself be deprived of all this, so she will stop her sister. She decided that she would decorate the wall in the distance, first with Mielle's head, then Kane's, and maybe the Count's too. A charge of treason would be appropriate for the destruction of this family. And yet, while the girl was thinking about her ideal plan, she noticed a familiar person among the crowd of people. Almost immediately, the girl realized that this was the same guy who grabbed her. She didn't understand what kind of coincidences these were, but at that very moment, the guy turned his head and their eyes met. But the most surprising thing was his action, because the guy just smiled. The girl shuddered at this and immediately closed the curtains, because he was the only one of them who caused fear. Arya didn't understand why he smiled, and she also didn't understand what he wanted from her. And yet, at that moment, Jessie entered the room, bringing jasmine tea and tart. The woman immediately noticed that something had alarmed Arya, so she asked what was wrong, but our heroine ignored the question and asked if the carriage had arrived. Jessie suddenly said that the carriage had arrived just as she was bringing the tea, but she still advised them to try the tart. Arya said that she didn't want to, and if everything was ready to leave, then they should go. All the girl's thoughts were filled with the stranger, because she thought that they would not meet again. And yet, it was better to just ignore him, because they were not connected in any way. The girl knew that even if he was a nobleman, he was a small one, so there was nothing to worry about. Having left the building, our heroine did not even want to look in different directions. The goal was to quickly leave here straight to the estate. And yet, finally raising her head, she noticed a carriage in front of her and realized that the danger was behind her. Exhaling heavily, our heroine decided that she had been so nervous for nothing. The girl approached the carriage and assumed that today was simply not her day, which is why she was paranoid. However, at that moment, something flew in front of Lady Arya's face, causing her to become a little scared. At that moment, the guy leaned over and said that it was a gift for the benefactress, but it was a little dirty. Of course, it was the crown prince who smiled and suggested that it was just bad timing. The guy smiled anyway and said that he was very glad that they met again. Our heroine, in turn, was only convinced once again that this was not her day. The guy continued to say that he promised to repay her for the information he shared with him the last time they met. Thanks to her advice, he was able to avoid a big loss. Arya was confused and didn't understand what this guy was even talking about. Our heroine said in surprise that she did not remember him. And in general, she was interested in when and with what she helped him. The guy replied that it was only because of her advice that he did not buy a ticket to the auction and saved a huge amount of money. The girl immediately realized that he was a provincial aristocrat, and that was all there was to it. And yet, at this moment, the guy seemed a little creepy to her, which made the girl a little worried. The stranger asked to accept a bouquet of tulips, the symbol of their country anyway. It was just a small gift, with which he wanted to wish her good luck. Without a doubt, this was surprising for our heroine, because at this meeting he was friendly. And yet, because of this, our heroine's mood only worsened. She certainly didn't need handouts from a guy with unclear intentions, but she still asked to lower the swords. And still the girl said that she couldn't accept his gift without knowing his name, without knowing what gender he was from. The guy immediately apologized and said that his name was Asher. Knowing a name is good, but our heroine also wanted to know what family he was from. And in response to this, he said that due to certain circumstances, he could only name him. Well, it was clear that Asher knew where she was from, but why couldn't he tell her where he was from? Was he afraid of being looked down upon in her eyes because of his pathetic last name? In any case, he had hidden intentions, and she did not like it at all, but she accepted the flowers. The knight immediately replied that the smell was ordinary, simple tulips. Then the guard asked in surprise if it was worth trying them. Our heroine took the flowers in bewilderment and said that it was not necessary to do so. She then turned her head and asked if there was anything else she needed to do, to which Asher replied that nothing more was needed. He thanked her for giving him a couple of minutes of her attention, but at that moment, before leaving, something incredible happened. The guy sat down on one knee and asked if he could kiss her hand goodbye. Arya coolly said that he couldn't do that, to which the prince said that she was apparently too cold, but there was no need to be so careful. The girl asked in surprise if he was being too friendly, because last time he had behaved differently. The guy immediately apologized for his behavior because the question was important to him. Our heroine sighed and said that in any case, it was time for her to go. Asher accepted this and saw her off with his smile. The girl began to climb into her carriage, realizing that she definitely didn't like this guy, which meant she wanted to do something. Suddenly, the girl began to stagger and tripped, causing her bouquet to fall out of her hands. The worst thing was that in addition to the flowers falling, she fell on top of them. What bad luck! The girl began to shyly go through all the words, saying that she was very sorry and that she did not understand how this had happened. Suddenly, Asher started laughing loudly, saying that this bouquet was definitely not suitable for the lady now, so it would be better to throw it away. Arya asked if he would do her a favor. The guy, of course, although he laughed all this time, reluctantly took the bouquet in his hands and answered the princess that it would be an honor for him to help her. As soon as our heroine got into the carriage, she was undoubtedly surprised, because this strange guy ended up just laughing. She thought he was at least a little darker, and all he did was laugh? What was wrong with this guy named Asher? She wondered what exactly he wanted to achieve by pretending that they were close. Soon the girl sighed heavily. Lady Arya assumed that it was better to forget this situation, because there was no point in worrying about this nonsense. The action moves to the palace. Our heroine, perplexed, asks the guard how the coachman could have ended up in the hospital. The guy replied that he was fine when he was driving them, but after lunch, he had a severe stomachache. They said he was in the nearest hospital, so the guy went there. It's surprising that the doctor said he had food poisoning, but for food to spoil so much in the cold season. However, his wife is fine. The guy also said that he found out that the lady's carriage was missing several parts, so the ride was uncomfortable. Arya told John that he did a good job. This is the information our heroine was looking for, so she told the guy that he was an exemplary knight and that he deserved a reward for it. The guy happily said that he was very grateful. Our heroine quickly realized that it was all because of Oscar's morning gift. Apparently, Mielle finally realized that she was her rival. However, it would be better if she spent her energy not on jealousy and envy, but on winning the heart of her lover. But she decided to please herself with such childish pranks. Unlike before, now Mielle was acting under the influence of emotions, and that's why she loses control so easily. But soon they will meet in a real fight. However, this is circumstantial evidence, since most of the estate's inhabitants are still on Mielle's side. Our heroine assumed that it would be wise to deal with her accomplices first. Soon Arya came to her mother. The woman woke up and asked in surprise what had happened. Arya replied that something had happened in their house, so she decided to tell her. The girl said that she had almost gotten into a big trouble. The countess immediately jumped up and asked what had happened. Arya answered that her carriage had almost met with a misfortune. Our heroine assumed that they were still not taken into account in this estate. And immediately, the woman called everyone to notify that while her husband was away, she was the mistress of this estate. The countess was perplexed and asked why no one had told her about this. She looked at the coachman named Illicht and asked why the main coachman had left without his mistress's permission, and he, without even checking, had set off on a broken carriage. The guy said that everything happened suddenly and he was in a hurry, so he took a broken carriage. The woman immediately assumed that the person responsible for the carriages was to blame. The guy, perplexed, began to say that this couldn't be because all the broken carriages were in a different place, and it was very far from where the normal carriages were. Arya thoughtfully turned to her mother and asked if the butler was by any chance responsible for the servants. Obviously, all suspicion fell on the butler in the blink of an eye, but he immediately noticed that he had been serving this family for 30 years. And yet he is ashamed to admit that he knew nothing about what happened until he was told. It is his duty to know and control everything, so he has no excuse. The butler, kneeling, said that he had to inform the masters of everything and follow their will, so he was undoubtedly guilty. People began to whisper, wondering how the butler could allow such a thing. Our heroine suddenly wondered if it was worth saving him. Still, he had a great reputation, so it would be a shame to fire him. Arya said he always did his job, so she trusted him. Our heroine suddenly assumed that this was the work of someone more authoritative who wanted to harm her. She decided to assume that this was the case. At this time, Mielle was in shock at how events were unfolding, so she even swallowed hard. Arya noticed this. It was funny that her sister would do something like this, even though she couldn't control her emotions. Anyway, Arya decided to call the guards. The mother asked in surprise, why? The girl explained that the coachman could have caused the misfortune. And anyway, if even the butler didn't know about it, then it was all set up. Our heroine said that she was scared to even imagine this, so she cannot simply close her eyes to what happened. Mielle suddenly asked if it was too much to call the guards here. After all, Illicht was retiring soon, and he was old, so he could have mixed up and forgotten. No one was hurt anyway. And yet our heroine clarified that she could have died. Her sister laughed and said that the carriage was not so bad, and she returned safely. Our heroine laughed at that moment because something in her sister's words amused her. Arya looked at Mielle in surprise and asked how she could claim that the carriage wasn't that bad. Looking at her bewildered sister, who seemed to have swallowed her tongue, the girl asked how she knew the exact condition of the carriage. As soon as there was no answer, our heroine again asked in bewilderment whether she really knew what specific condition the carriage was in. Mielle replied that she had heard about it, but in that case, Arya was interested in who and where she had heard it from. The girl didn't even know what to answer, and at that moment, Emma intervened, who began to whisper something in the lady's ear. When suddenly, the girl said that she heard her own conversation. She had gotten home safe and sound after all, so she said it wasn't that bad. And they immediately decided that her remark was quite fair. However, our heroine noted that she might also be very lucky. After all, if the carriage had lost a wheel and fallen, she might not be here. Mielle asked her sister to stop and stop insisting. And yet, our heroine, as if in despair, began to say that if something like this had happened to her, she could not even imagine how her sister would have ended up in a broken carriage. The girl started crying, saying that even if she was unharmed, she would still be worried. What if something like this happens and the carriage falls next time? Arya started screaming, saying that she would now be afraid of this every time she left the estate. Mielle was shocked by the scene that played out. The girl soon ran into her mother's arms, saying that she didn't even want to think about it, and yet she asked if she was too worried. The simple fact was that her blood ran cold just thinking about it. Arya decided that it was indeed a blessing, that this nightmare had ended well. Mielle swallowed hard and agreed, and in this case, our heroine passed the decision on to her mother so that she could make a fair and wise decision, although it is obvious that she will side with her daughter. But still, the girl decided to ask what Mielle thought. And yet, she had to hurry, because her miserable old servant was shaking very much. Arya began to laugh evilly in her thoughts, wanting to see her sister turn away from the one who worked for her. She wanted to finally see her rotten self. The girl sighed heavily and said that they really should do this. At that moment, the old man fell to the ground, and the people began to whisper in confusion. Soon the action takes us to the morning of the next day. Just as everyone was about to have breakfast, our heroine suddenly asked where Mielle was. Mother replied that she would eat at home. Arya sighed and said that her sister had been eating there lately, and she was worried about her health. In reality, she was probably just sick to her stomach, just looking at Arya. And today, her usually bad mood was even worse. She hoped they would see her when she announced her decision. In the race with her sister, our heroine spent 10 years longer than her in the intrigues of high society, and of course, that life, due to her stupidity, ended in execution. But now everything is going well. Our heroine literally sparkled from these thoughts, which made even eating a pleasant experience. At this moment, the butler approached Lady Arya and said that a man from the jewelry store had arrived, and he had left him waiting at the door. The girl stood up for the butler yesterday, and his attitude towards her changed dramatically, which was very good. The girl thanked him for the information. Arya assumed that they had brought the return gift she had prepared for Oscar. Mother was hurrying her, because all the servants were due to arrive soon. A moment later, our heroine approached the entrance, where a representative of the jewelry store stood. As soon as the girl approached, the guy opened the box and asked her to check if everything was okay with her order. Just looking at the hairpin, the girl said that it was beautiful, although it was not necessary to make them so perfect, of course, but it will seem that she treated them so meticulously. Thanks to all the girl's efforts yesterday, today was going to be a magical day. Finally, the mother announced the final decision that she had thought over the night. The woman declared that the coachman-elect would be dismissed from the service of the Rosente family. In addition, the coachman, who had left his mistress without permission, would now be cleaning the stables. While some people were puzzled, others even managed to find an advantage in this. In any case, at this moment, Mielle staggered back and leaned on the maid. Arya, in turn, was even glad that now the man who betrayed her would do the same job as the newcomers in the estate. But Mielle was incredibly pale. The girl soon couldn't hold back and said that she wasn't feeling well at all, so she would go. Our heroine came up and started to see her sister off, saying that she had noticed it yesterday. She should rest because she was probably very worried about her, for which Arya is grateful. Mielle sheepishly said that everything was fine and that she was really worried, but in any case she would go. A few meters later, our heroine called her and asked her to stop. Arya turned to the maid and asked her to give her the pendant that had just been delivered from the jewelry store. The girl, of course, did not want to give it under such circumstances, but she still tried. She said that her sister had been unwell lately, that she even ate at her place, and that they rarely saw each other, so she didn't know when she would see her again. As soon as her maid took the gift in her hands, Arya asked her sister to open it. A moment later, the lady took out a pendant from there, which was incredibly beautiful. Arya said that she had not been able to properly thank her sister for borrowing the dress, so she asked her to accept it. The girl looked at her puzzled sister and asked if she didn't like it. Mielle suddenly came to her senses and said that she liked it. Arya exhaled and said that she was glad about it. And yet, that was the end of the story with the borrowed dress. She knew for sure that her sister didn't like this arrangement, and yet she asked Mielle to try it on. The girl's maid came up to her and helped her fasten the pendant, which really did look good. The assistant said in surprise that this pendant suited her incredibly, and our heroine pretended to be very happy. Even Mother said that she was very pleased to look at her sisters. In any case, she will go now because she is leaving after lunch. Arya thanked her for her care and the right decision. The woman waved her hand and said that she was only doing her duty. The funny thing is that this was said by the one who dumped all her duties on the butler. Although it was our heroine's mother, she admitted that she was very lazy. Soon the action takes us to the office of Lady Arya, who was glad that the coachman fell under the sword of justice. But it would still be wonderful to fit Mielle's neck under it. But our heroine already had her work cut out for her. The girls' maids were still with her and provided her with comfort, although it was a mere trifle. She would quickly deal with them when she had the chance. The first thing our heroine was going to do was take care of this main maid, Emma. She has been with the girl since early childhood, so she can direct her actions. Mielle will become a villain later anyway, but now she is just a stupid child. She probably wasn't the only one who had a hand in this incident. In general, it was worth getting to know Emma better. So first, it was better to get close to this freckled maid. Her greedy expression was too eloquent. And yet, if Emma was involved in this story, then she doubts that this girl did not also contribute to her execution in a past life. Just one thought of that day made our heroine clutch her neck and experience phantom pain. The girl opened the box and looked at the hourglass that had miraculously saved her life. It is precisely because our heroine simply looks at them that she feels better. At that moment, Jessie came into the room and said that the courier was ready. Arya was surprised, because it happened even faster than she thought. The girl said that she would write a letter quickly. Soon the girl began to look for accessories from the jewelry store. Even though our heroine was given 5 sheets of paper to spare, she simply had nothing to write, so she had to try. So, the letter was to the esteemed Oscar Frederick. She was sending a return gift for his lavish gift to her, so she asked him to accept a small token of her appreciation. Our heroine soon finished writing the letter and asked the maid to pack it together with the gift and also ask for it to be delivered as quickly as possible. The girl turned the clock over, thinking that the sooner it happened, the sooner Arya would be able to enjoy Mielle's distorted face. Suddenly, Jessie approached the lady and asked if she needed more tea. The girl raised her head in bewilderment and looked at the maid who had just left with the order to deliver the letter. Arya said she hadn't invited her, but Jessie said that writing the letter would take some time, so she decided she could bring some tea. The girl wanted to say that she had already written the letter, but suddenly, she discovered a pen, which she had also put aside some time ago. The girl looked at the letter and noticed that it only had the very beginning written with the address. Arya still couldn't figure out what it was. Was this some kind of déjà vu? After all, the maid had literally just taken the letter away. Our heroine simply put the pen on the table and asked to send a gift. Jessie wanted to say something, but at that moment, the girl's attention was drawn to the fact that there were 5 sheets of paper on the table. And again, she remembered that she had already checked this. Was she really so intoxicated with joy that she had miscalculated the first time? However, the maid still said that she could not send the gift without a letter. Our heroine nevertheless agreed with the girl, and after some time, wrote exactly the same letter. Jessie took it and went downstairs. The door closed, but Lady Arya was left alone with her thoughts. For some reason, she felt very tired. The girl decided that it was all because she was overtired, and she couldn't explain what had happened in any other way. As soon as he turned off the lamp, she promised herself that she would lie down for a bit. But a moment later, she was already watching her 9th dream. Soon a maid came into the room and asked in surprise if she had caught a cold, since she could have called a doctor. Our heroine began to drink the contents of the glass, almost in one gulp, and then said that everything was fine. Returning the glass, the girl added that now, it seemed, she was awake, but the whole thing was that she was overtired. Jessie even said that she had been sleeping since yesterday's lunch, and still Arya said she didn't know what was wrong, and yet she felt fine. Jessie asked the lady before leaving if she wanted dessert. Our heroine replied that she would eat it later. Jessie smiled and said that in that case, she could call her as needed. Left alone with the clock, our heroine wondered how she managed to sleep for so long, even though she wasn't sick. Once again, the girl turned the hourglass over, and it started to go in the other direction. Suddenly, Jessie's voice was heard, saying that she was trying to wake up Lady Arya. The girl was saying the same thing as a couple of minutes ago. She was telling about how the lady slept for a whole day and didn't wake up. Our heroine at this moment was madly frightened, because of which she jumped up in bewilderment. Jessie looked at the lady even more surprised and asked what had happened. Arya was puzzled and asked what had happened to the maid, since she had already said that she would not eat dessert. Jessie in turn pointed to the juice, saying that she had not yet drunk it, so she thought that she had not finished her meal. Should she really put the glass away right away? Looking at the newly filled glass of juice, the girl again thought that this was déjà vu, and she didn't know if she had gone crazy, but it seemed she had returned to the past. At that very moment, the girl repeated the words she had spoken and turned the hourglass over again. Our heroine began to smile, saying that God loved her unconditionally. This hourglass took her back in time. Thus, after several experiments, our heroine understood how the hourglass works. Firstly, by turning the hourglass, she can only go back in time once a day. Plus, she can only go back 5 minutes. And yet it was quite enough to correct minute mistakes. Arya was sitting in a math class at that moment in a very good mood. The teacher noticed this too, so she asked what happened. Arya said something good. The woman smiled and said that she, too, would like to experience a happy moment with her. The girl smiled and asked if it was true. Anyway, the watch worked only in her hands. Our heroine said that she had met an old and disgusting fox. The woman asked in bewilderment if she really had a pet. Arya said she had a lot of fun watching her wander around. The teacher laughed and said she'd like to see her too. The girl smiled and replied that she was already here. If you go to the mirror, you can see her very well, and this fox is always asking her to meet her son, constantly trying to get him somewhere, even though he is a drunk. The woman began to nervously say that she really does have someone who is so annoying to her. At that moment, our heroine looked at the woman and said that it was about her. And yet, she was even embarrassed to see how confused she was. Then the girl laughed to herself, saying that it wasn't even funny anymore. It was a shame to use a watch for such nonsense. In any case, she turned it over. As soon as time turned back, our heroine smiled and happily told the woman that her lessons were very interesting. By the way, after using the hourglass, our heroine always feels very tired and falls asleep for a long time. She didn't know. Maybe it was the power that was eating away her life. But even if her life was getting shorter, she couldn't miss such a chance. She had to use everything that was given to her. In fact, the girl began to use this to amuse herself a little. For example, it seemed to her a good idea to pour a jug of water on the head of her hated sister, which she did, and then immediately turned over the clock, or the times when she deliberately prevented her from walking. She was sure that in such a boring everyday life, there should be a drop of fun. Soon the girl turned to her maid in bewilderment. Jessie even shuddered in surprise and asked what had happened. Arya asked if he was still not here. Jessie thoughtfully replied that 2 weeks had passed since the night sent had returned, but there was still no news. And yet the boy soon came running. He said that he wanted to return to her only with a reply letter, but at the academy it was exam time, so he accepted the gift, but did not write the letter. Our heroine still praised the guard and gave him a day off. The guy was incredibly happy. Well, what's the main thing is that Oscar accepted her gift. And even more so, if the guy knew what was inside, he could have refused. But everything turned out even better. Strengthening the connection that had arisen, our heroine wanted to become friends, and if it didn't work out, she would steal his heart with the help of an hourglass. But it would be better to get an answer from him, of course. The action takes us a few days ahead. Early in the morning, Jessie pleased the lady by saying that a letter from Oscar had arrived. The girl was so surprised that she screamed throughout the palace. She immediately began to read it. The letter said that he was very grateful for the gift and wanted to discuss something with her in person, so he would be grateful if she would write the date and time. The girl thought about it at that moment, because Oscar had written only strictly to the point, although she had written to him in exactly the same manner. But then again, judging by what he wrote, he wasn't planning on returning the gift. He might ask to end the relationship because of Mielle, and yet Jessie crept up on him like a ghost. The girl asked to bring her a pen and paper because she needed to send a response right away. Jessie only knew that the letter was from Oscar, but Lady Mielle would soon find out about it too. But there would hardly be any trouble because Mielle was a kind and sincere girl. One way or another, our heroine had already finished writing the letter, which she handed to the maid and asked her to send it to Mr. Oscar. The girl smiled and asked to deliver the letter as soon as possible because it was very important. Jessie suddenly stared at the letter and accepted the order, but for some reason, her soul was too uneasy. The action moves forward sometime when our heroine had a whole bunch of desserts in front of her. She ate all the goodies. Jessie looked at everything that was happening in horror and didn't even know how to hint to the lady that she should eat less. However, once the girl had eaten her fill, she used the watch to turn back time. After a few moments, Jessie looked at all this beauty in bewilderment and asked the mistress if she was sure of her order. Arya replied that she was serious. Jessie could take what she wanted and give the rest to the servants. The maid, perplexed, said that she thought it was all for her. The girl explained that she lied about it being for her because if she had told the truth, Jessie would have bought something more modest. She hoped to cheer everyone up. Yes, that's right, our heroine ate her fill 5 minutes ago, and now even the smell of it makes her sick. It's a pity that when you turn back time, your stomach doesn't empty. And yet, Jessie said that while she was busy with desserts, the textbook she ordered arrived. Arya was happy, because it even arrived faster than she thought. The girl soon began to read, and was glad that she understood what was written quite well, which meant that she would be able to read it. The home economics books were old and outdated, which she could not understand, so she ordered a textbook on the basics of economics for young nobles. Since her return to the past changed the course of events anyway, it would have been better if she had been reborn as a boy. Aristocrats are required to graduate from the academy, while noblewomen have nowhere to study. Well, complaining wouldn't help matters anyway, so she started reading. Last time she referred to rumors and avoided answering the Count regarding that information, but the level of trust in him depends on who exactly the informant is. Arya, of course, could not change her gender, so in order for the Count to trust her advice in the future, she would need to have a proper understanding of economics, history, and politics. Of course, she could have discussed other topics with the Duke, but then the Count would receive all the honors, and her maximum would be recognition as a charming daughter with good instincts. That is why our heroine wanted to strengthen her position, and that is why she decided to go into business. In that life, Arya met women, aristocrats, far from perfect, who did not attach any importance to appearance and were fixated only on money and influence. Arya laughed at him, because then, having been born a beauty, she did not envy them at all and was confident in her own superiority. However, a beautiful face can also be considered poison. Because everyone around her was coddling Arya, she was not aware of the real situation. But in this life, the girl was not going to repeat such a mistake, so she needed to gain knowledge. Money and her own property are hers. Money is power, and Arya will study hard for it. At this point, Jessie turned to the lady. She apologized for disturbing her from important matters, but she needed to ask something. Arya was wondering what the maid wanted to ask. Jessie suddenly asked if she was sure she wanted to celebrate her birthday so modestly. After all, it seemed to her that it could have been made larger, especially when compared to last year. That day was truly magical for Arya. She arranged a real carnival for herself and for the guests. Arya suddenly thought that it would be better if the watch returned her to the moment before she got to the county. Jessie still said that last year was a grand occasion, but not to invite anyone at all this time. Our heroine said that she would just like to invite a few ladies she knows and have lunch with them, but she needs to pay attention to the food so that all the girls will like it. Jessie agreed, but if the mistress changed her mind, she should let her know right away. Arya thanked her and said that everything was fine. Mielle's birthday is a little later than Arya's, and she would still get criticized there, so she didn't see the point in even trying to fix it. Sooner or later, she'll have to live up to the standard of organizing everything on a grand scale, of course, but she doesn't have to do it now. And what's more, the girl would like to change public opinion about herself, and she should start with herself. The action moves to the next day. Our heroine happily looked out the window and smiled. The reason for this was that Sarah's teacher came to visit them, and was also glad to see the girl. Our heroine ran to meet her, and immediately hugged her. Sarah was glad that the girl had not changed at all since their first meeting. Had she really not learned anything from their lessons? Arya started laughing and saying that she remembered everything. She just saw her and didn't even notice what she did. The girl took a couple of steps back and bowed like a real lady. The girl smiled and raised her head and asked the teacher how she was doing. Sarah replied that thanks to her prayers, everything was wonderful. Anyway, the woman said it was quite chilly there, so she suggested they go up and talk there. Our heroine assumed that if before she was just pretending, now she was sincerely happy with Sarah, because no matter who she met, she was still the best. As soon as they sat down in the room, Sarah decided to ask the lady what she would like for her birthday. A dress, or maybe a hairpin. Our heroine smiled and said that all the listed options were unnecessary, and she would only like a scarf with her embroidery. The woman immediately asked if she really wanted this, because if so, she could prepare at least 10, at least 100 scarves. Arya smiled and said that it really was so. Moreover, she didn't know if it would be too much trouble, but she wanted a scarf with different embroidery techniques and hoped she wasn't overdoing it. She clarified her wishes and said that she would like a scarf with the same pattern that she had embroidered for herself. The teacher asked if she understood correctly about paired scarves. Arya said that if they had a scarf like that, they would be tied together in a special way. She even blushed when she said it. However, the teacher said that Lady Arya was also very dear to her, and she would like them to remain friends forever. Arya began to rejoice even more, because these were the words she wanted to hear. The woman assured the lady that she would do her best and put all her soul and feelings into the embroidery. Arya replied that she was already looking forward to it. If she becomes a marquise, she will be very busy soon after their debut, and somewhere around that time, she should embroider a handkerchief that will attract the marquise's attention. Our heroine suddenly said that she was looking forward to the debut of her teacher, Sarah, more than her birthday. But the teacher said that she wasn't really looking forward to it. Arya asked in surprise why this was so, because she thought something good would happen. Everyone would see how graceful she was. Or rather, the marquise would see her outstanding embroidery, right? Even if life becomes more pleasant for her only after meeting the right man, at least a rich and loving husband is better than a poor aristocrat from the provinces. After Sarah thanked the lady for her support, Arya decided it would be best to slow down here. She understood that if she went too far, this conversation would pointlessly upset the teacher, who was already expecting nothing from her debut. At that moment, the girl asked what the teacher would like to do when she grows up. She smiled and said she wanted to teach children. Arya assumed she was talking about becoming a teacher, and she was, and thanks to her. Sarah started dreaming about this thanks to their lessons, so when she comes of age, she would like to start teaching cute and charming children like Arya. Our heroine was surprised, because all this was because of her role as a charming child, and yet she was shocked. She knew that she liked her, but she thought that she already liked children. Arya was incredibly happy that she was so sincerely imbued with it. How could she not use it? Arya laughed, deciding that it would be a real sin. Sarah suddenly said that she is waiting for the lady's debut more than her own. She will definitely not leave everyone indifferent, because she is charming and beautiful. Our heroine said that she was incredibly pleased to hear this from her, and yet she trembled at the thought of it. She asked the teacher if she would be with her that day. And finally, the day came when the debutante was accompanied by the Marchioness. Something like this could not go unnoticed. Every time our heroine gets one step closer to her desired future, she truly begins to tremble with her whole soul. Music was everywhere that day. The orchestra played songs for the young lady all day long. All the invited girls congratulated our heroine on her birthday with smiles on their faces. But Arya wasn't so happy, so she just sighed heavily and thanked the lady for her congratulations. The girls noticed this and asked if everything was okay, but Arya replied that everything was fine. She just couldn't sleep at night because she was worried about this day. But she was upset because Oscar probably wouldn't come. She definitely wrote him in a letter to come today, but why isn't he here yet? Decided not to come? Still, it was good that there was at least an orchestra, otherwise it would have been completely dull. Arya was glad that the maid bothered her every day. However, it was finally time for presents. Before dinner was served, it would be logical to open all the presents. Having started to open gift after gift, our heroine happily thanked the girl, saying that it was all very nice. And looking at the box, she even said that she would put it in her room. Only she thought to herself that it was junk that she would give to the maid. And finally, it was time for the main gift. Sarah turned to the girl and said that she had gathered her strength and tried very hard. Handing over the box with the gift, the girl said that she really hoped that she would like everything. Opening the box, our heroine found a neatly wrapped gift inside. The first thing that caught her eye was an incredibly beautiful scarf. As soon as the ladies noticed the scarf, they began to ask in bewilderment whether Lady Sarah had really made it. The girl began to say, embarrassed, that she had not been able to decide on the pattern for a long time. However, she pulled out another handkerchief from behind her back, saying that there were only 2 of them, The ladies started telling the girl that she was a real craftswoman and wondered why she hadn't said anything about it before. Sarah laughed and said that she hadn't really hidden it all. At this time, our heroine almost cried, because she was not exaggerating when she thought that of all her achievements at the moment, the best was winning Sarah over to her side. Soon the lady turned to Arya and said that her dress was incredibly beautiful, and the cape was obviously made of expensive fur. But isn't it difficult to get hold of it now? The girl answered them that these were all gifts from her father, and that she herself was not very knowledgeable about such things. The butler presented the lady with a huge pile of gifts, saying that the count was very sorry that he could not attend the birthday, but still wanted to please. All the ladies happily began to say that the count definitely had taste, and that the ladies loved Arya very much. Surprisingly, just a little information, and her father's attitude towards her changed greatly. And yet, our heroine decided that there was something else that the ladies needed to understand. At that moment, the girl said that despite all these beautiful gifts, she liked the teddy bear her father gave her the most. Arya even admitted that she always sleeps with him in her arms. One of the ladies even asked how plush and cute he is if she sleeps with him. They all wanted to see him. In just a moment, our heroine showed this teddy bear. The girls were shocked. They began to look at the precious stones, saying that they sparkled very nicely. Arya smiled, saying that her father really had a great taste. With this, the girl wanted to show that she was on completely different levels with them. The girls really started to whisper in bewilderment, but Sarah sincerely said that this bear was adorable. She also noticed that this bear suits her, and it is the first time she sees precious stones in the ears. The count clearly loves her, and all this is because she helped him earn money. In any case, our heroine again began to thank the ladies for coming. Even in gratitude for their coming, our heroine fussed over the choice of desserts and hoped that they would be satisfied. Raising the glass of juice, the girl smiled and suggested they begin their meal. There was a clink of glasses. The girls congratulated Arya on her birthday, but at that moment, another person joined them. It was Lady Mielle, who was glad to see them. The girl said that she had been looking for her sister everywhere. The girl asked in bewilderment why she hadn't invited her to tea, because she even felt a little offended. Arya asked in confusion what she was saying, because she was so sick, the migraine was not going away, and she did not even think of disturbing her. And yet Mielle said that for her sake, she would come down for a while. In any case, she thought that her sister had not invited her on purpose. Our heroine, perplexed, asked Mielle what she thought, because she would not have dared to do such a thing. Suddenly, Emma approached Arya with a bouquet of flowers, and Mielle asked if she was right in knowing that she liked flowers. One way or another, the girl congratulated her sister on her birthday, which even shocked our heroine a little. Then Mielle turned around and started to leave, saying that she only came to congratulate her, so she wished everyone a good mood. And now the situation is that the older sister did not invite the only younger sister to the birthday party, which is a strong blow to the reputation. What to do now? And as luck would have it, our heroine didn't even take an hourglass with her. Should she go to her room to get it? Will she have enough time? And what if she doesn't have enough time? Our heroine was at a loss, but she still understood that she couldn't lose her composure because of this. The girl decided that she needed to get out of the situation, so she sighed heavily and said that she was glad that Mielle was finally feeling better today. The lady was asked if she had any health problems, to which Arya replied that her father and brother were not around, so she was lonely, and on top of everything else, they didn't have a very warm relationship with her and her mother, which only made things more difficult for her, and Arya couldn't help her in any way. Sarah, puzzled, said that she didn't think so, and the other ladies chimed in, saying that it wasn't her fault. The girls said that they were both young, so they would definitely become a real family. Time would fix everything. Our heroine smiled again and thanked all the ladies. The lady was even told to call them if she suddenly felt lonely. Fortunately, everything was resolved without problems, and Mielle moved for the first time, but nothing happened. After some time, our heroine said goodbye to Sarah, saying that she was glad that she had come. The girl climbed into her carriage and said that she was already waiting for their next meeting. However, the action soon takes us to Arya's room, which was not as cheerful as during the day. The girl looked at the burning bouquet and thought that all this was such a trifle that she could easily cope with it. But it was worth getting confused for a second and she already wanted to run for the watch. She didn't like how dependent she had become on them, but it would have been even more foolish not to take advantage of the benefits she had. She should have kept the hourglass ready for her to use, but it was good that she realized it before anything serious happened. At that moment, Jessie burst into the room and distracted her from her thoughts by saying just one word. "He's arrived." The lady told Jessie to take him to the living room, and she needed to change, so she needed to come back right away. After some time, the girl came out of her room thinking that she needed to greet Oscar. However, Mielle came out of her room and decided to greet Mr. Oscar, thinking that he had come to see her. The girl looked at Mr. Oscar in surprise and asked what brought him to them today. In any case, she asked if he would mind if she kept him company while he waited. The guy naturally said that he didn't mind, so they could talk. Pointing to the desserts, the lady told the guest that for some reason he looked thin. The guy laughed and said that they had exams, so he was a bit loaded. Mielle was surprised that he had so much to do, but he still came on a weekday. Oscar explained that he had urgent business here. The girl looked at the bouquet of snow-white flowers and understood that they were for someone like Arya. But as soon as the hands of this offspring touched them, they too would become trash. Mielle suddenly said that his sister apparently invited him to the birthday party, but she was never invited. She was lucky enough to only give her a gift. The girl complained about how her sister hated her, and she probably didn't want to bother her, but she was offended. But Oscar was perplexed because he didn't know that Arya's birthday was today. At that moment, the girl asked if he could come to her birthday party, if it wouldn't be too much trouble for him, of course. If she remembers everything correctly, then by that time, the exams should be over, and her birthday will fall on the holidays. He is, of course, always busy, but if he can come, like today, even for a short time, then she will be incredibly happy. Oscar sighed heavily, thinking that their marriage was already being discussed, which meant he couldn't avoid her. The guy told her that he would try to free up time. Mielle giggled and said that, in that case, she would send him an invitation. At that moment, our heroine stood behind the door and listened to their conversation. Soon the door opened. Mielle stood up and said that she would go now. Oscar said goodbye to the girl, a little embarrassed. Before leaving, the girl threw a sly smile as a sign of her victory over her sister. In any case, our heroine approached the guy and asked if he had been waiting for her for too long. Oscar replied that everything was fine because Lady Mielle had kept him company. Our heroine was incredibly angry because her sister took advantage of the fact that she was changing clothes, but she couldn't show it. The girl asked the guy if everything was okay with him. Oscar nodded his head, and our heroine immediately said that everything was fine with her too. And by the way, she was wearing the hairpin he gave her. Looking at him, the girl asked if this hairpin suited her, because she liked it very much. The guy even blushed a little at that moment, because he couldn't look at such beauty for long. He said that it suited her very well. Arya suddenly asked about her brooch. Did he really not like it? Oscar replied that her gift was unnecessary. Arya was very sorry that he did not have time for her letter. After all, it was the first time she gave someone a gift. Arya explained that she didn't yet understand all this very well and all the subtleties, so she asked for forgiveness if she had burdened him. The guy asked in confusion if it was really the first time. The girl was ashamed to admit it, but it was true, and she hoped that he had at least pleased him. Arya was very worried that the brooch might not suit him. Just at that moment, the guy's servant came up and said that he had just brought it. The girl smiled and asked if she could pin it up to see. The guy was still embarrassed, but said she could do it. Putting the brooch on his chest, our heroine knew for sure that he wanted to return her, but everything turned out much better. Soon the girl looked at the gentleman and said that it really suited him very well. The guy sheepishly thanked the lady for the compliment. Oscar also said that he heard about her birthday. The girl replied that they had just finished celebrating it and she was going to rest, so she was late. The guy explained that everything was fine and that he was leading to the wrong thing. He handed her a bouquet and asked her to accept it. Arya was incredibly happy to receive it. Oscar added that he didn't know it was her birthday, so he couldn't prepare a proper gift. Arya still said she was very pleased, and yet, if he still felt obligated, she offered him to become her pen pal as a gift. The girl explained that she has no friends and is usually alone, so she feels a little lonely, but because of her background, She does not have a very good education. The guy immediately said that there was nothing wrong with it, but there was one, but that he couldn't tell her. He felt that he had to refuse her. He could not have this kind of relationship with a lady of the same house as the one he was going to marry. He had to be gently refused and told that they should not communicate anymore. At this point, our heroine decided that this was too impudent and daring a request, and that it would upset Mielle, because they had such a good relationship. The girl said that she was very lonely, so she blurted it out, and yet she did not want to burden him. Sighing heavily, the guy still couldn't say what he wanted. All that came out of his mouth was that he would definitely write to her. Our heroine was very happy about that. Oscar said that it wouldn't hurt for one of them to check in on each other by text occasionally. The girl thanked him and said that she was incredibly happy. The guy, of course, although he felt guilty, but if you think about it, then sometimes you can write to her. He just couldn't hurt this sweet, poor thing. However, the action takes us to the next morning. Our heroine has finally woken up, and the first thing she does is start stretching. She was lucky that she had used the hourglass successfully yesterday, because Oscar had almost refused her. She was incredibly glad that she had not used it on her sister, because then everything would have failed. Still, since she needs to use the watch productively, she needs to have some way of telling time. That means it might be a good idea to order a watch that can keep exactly 5 minutes. Just then, Jessie came into the room and offered to give them something to eat, and also said that the lady had been fast asleep again, and she was worried if she was okay. Our heroine smiled and said that yesterday was a holiday and she was overtired. Jessie still said that it ended early, and now she should be feeling weak. After all, Arya had slept for almost a whole day, so she wanted to call a doctor. Nevertheless, our heroine assured the maid that everything was fine. The maid suddenly remembered that the lady had once said that using them would shorten her lifespan. Was her life really in danger? Our heroine realized that it was because she had timed it wrong, but she still said that everything was fine. Jessie stood her ground and advised calling a doctor. It was starting to get a little annoying, because Jessie could be so stubborn. In the past, she had gotten so fed up with it that she had torn out her tongue and lost all trust in herself. And yet, even if she is so persistent, she has been much more resourceful lately than before. She did not know that the maid was so worried about her. Our heroine even wanted to reward the maid for this. But in her thoughts, she forgot about something. The girl looked at Jessie leaving and thought that it was time to take steps towards a new level. Arya called the maid to her. Jessie turned around instantly and screamed just as instantly. Our heroine, who stood as if a millimeter away from the maid, asked if she was really scared. The girl answered that she simply appeared too suddenly. Arya asked in surprise if she was afraid that she would eat her. Most likely, it was because of what she had to go through a few months ago, when she was still immature. Jessie was always like this, and it made you want to tease her even more. But then you would get into trouble. Arya asked to be allowed to tell everything honestly. The girl suddenly said that she liked her much more than Jessie imagined. The maid immediately turned as red as a tomato and didn't even know what to say in response to this. Our heroine looked at the maid in bewilderment and asked what was wrong with her, because she was behaving as if she was mocking her. An awkward silence soon followed, to which Jessie reminded that there had been strange situations. The girl coughed sheepishly and said that there had indeed been a few bad cases, and yet she will not deny that she behaved terribly before, and now she is ashamed of it, so she is trying to improve. In any case, it seems to her that the maid still perceives her as ignorant, and it is certainly her business to think so. But our heroine assured her that she really liked her. Soon the girl fixed the pin on Jessie's chest. Arya explained that it was her gift to her, something like an apology, remorse for everything she had to go through. But in any case, she had every right to accept this brooch, and so she hoped that Jessie would wear it. Then, our heroine asked the maid if she could go to the jewelry store. The girl asked again in surprise. Arya explained that she wanted to make a watch that would measure exactly 5 minutes by pressing a button. She wanted to carry it around with her, so she asked to come up with something about that. Jessie said she understood the order and ran like a bullet to the carriage. Our heroine was even surprised by how quickly she ran away. Did she really like the brooch that much? But she would have asked Jessie to carry the hourglass in a box. However, As soon as the maid left, another carriage arrived at the palace. Soon our heroine saw Sarah in front of her, who had come to visit her. Arya quickly got dressed herself and went out into the corridor, but she was a little hot, which even Sarah noticed. Arya was so excited about the idea of making Jessie happy with a brooch that she even forgot that Sarah was supposed to come. Now the question remained: who would be the most logical choice? Our heroine decided that Mielle would in any case begin her intrigues by assigning her maids to her, and since that was the case, she needed to choose who to lure to her side. The lady chose one maid and said that her only maid was away, so she wanted her to help her. The maid nodded her head and said that she was listening to them. Our heroine even noticed that the maid's face had changed a lot, and this only meant that she was very close to Mielle, which couldn't help but please her. Soon the girl would look at the tea and tell the maid that it was similar to the tea Jessie brewed, but it had an interesting aroma, and of course, it was a compliment. However, at this point, Arya asked the maid if she was free for now. Could she serve her until the evening? Only the girl said that she had an order from Mrs. Mielle that she had to carry out. She could have called another maid. Our heroine instantly turned her head and glanced at her watch. She immediately realized that it was the perfect time. The girl said that nothing could be done about it, but she would like to hear the answer to a few questions. Arya asked if there was a Mielle, a girl with freckles, among the maids and what her name was. The maid replied that her name was Annie. Our heroine asked how old she was and how long she had been working at the estate. She was 15, and it seemed that she would soon be 5 years since she had been working at the estate. Arya thought for a moment and said that this girl was even younger than she thought. However, it turns out that she is the youngest among the Mielle maids. The maid nodded her head and said that among the maids of the estate, Annie was the youngest. Arya asked if she was busy now, to which the girl replied that she couldn't tell. Without even listening to the end of what the maid said in her monotonous voice, our heroine asked for an hourglass from the jewelry chest. The time was exactly 5 minutes. Arya added that immediately after this request, the maid could go. As soon as our heroine took the watch in her hands, she turned it over and turned the time back again. The time changed by 5 minutes, and the first thing Arya said was that if the maid was so busy, then nothing could be done. The girl apologized and asked if she could call another maid. After all, the youngest one would be fine for the job. After a while, Annie stood in the room and listened to the conversation between the lady and the teacher, who were deciding what they would do today. They wanted to practice today. At that moment, our heroine looked at Annie and asked why she was shaking all over. The girl came to her senses and, perplexed, said that everything was fine. Sarah smiled and said that they could practice the opening for now and start with the greeting. But for the dancing, they needed to find shoes with pointed toes. The teacher immediately said that her legs would hurt a lot, but the more practice, the better. Annie sat there dejected and didn't understand what she was doing there. At this time, the girls were dancing, and the teacher was surprised to note that Arya danced very well. The girl laughed and said that it meant that she herself was not training in vain. And yet Sarah said that her manners would still need some work. Annie's face suddenly changed at the sight of high society. Arya assumed that she had overdone it and danced too provocatively, a habit from the time when she danced only to attract male attention. The teacher suddenly called her over and asked her not to pull her partner towards her, but to keep her distance. Each time it got better and better. Sarah suddenly said that when she was about to do a turn, she had to look her partner in the eyes. They conduct a dialogue through dance first and foremost. The teacher also noted that before greeting, one should gracefully wave the fan. At that very moment, Jessie burst into the room with a roar. The girl was very tired, but asked the lady for forgiveness for being late. Arya was generally shocked that she arrived so quickly. Arya said that there was no need to hurry, so it was better to drink some water. The maid started to say that everything was fine, but the lady insisted. Even Sarah said that she might faint. Jessie thanked the lady and grabbed the jug of water. Arya suddenly turned her head and told Annie that she could go free. The girl even got a little lost. And yet, soon the lady asked where they left off. Arya reminded them that they were dancing, but those shoes were too painful. They soon decided to just sit down and relax, and Jessie asked the mistress to look at her legs. There was no one else to perform for, so there was no need to overexert herself. Our heroine was more than confident that she had managed to hook Annie, who at that time was walking down the corridor with different thoughts. And yet, the girl walked down the corridor and was amazed at what she saw. This dance, the wonderful society. Well, in any case, it was time to return to work. Soon the action moves to the dining room. Arya asked which maid they were talking about. Sister replied that she had heard that she only had one maid. It was surprising that she even had to call her servant, so she could recommend one of her maids for her to take. The funny thing was that Mielle decided to take advantage of the opportunity and assign a maid to spy on her. She probably wanted to know about Oscar, and yet the girl was grateful. Our heroine asked if she could take the youngest. After all, she only needed help with small jobs, and everyone else was busy. And yet, even though Arya said this, she was tense about being watched so closely. Annie sat as tense as possible. Our heroine suddenly decided to call Annie, asking her to brew her some new tea. Annie immediately ran up to the table and began to quickly wave her hands here and there. Still, she is definitely a Mielle maid. Even if she is greedy, her skills show that she has been working for quite a long time. Suddenly, our heroine felt a strange smell that hit her nose. The girl immediately laughed, thinking to herself that Annie was a very ill-mannered child. The maid suddenly raised her head and noticed a fixed gaze, which was a little frightening. Soon our heroine came so close that it even scared Annie. Arya asked if she could take a closer look at her face. A few moments later, our heroine sat the girl down at the table and washed her with water. The girl asked her to sit quietly for a while. Annie, of course, was surprised, but decided not to move much. Our heroine explained that she hadn't seen such beautiful skin for a long time, and still, it was a great loss that because of the freckles, it was unnoticeable. A few moments later, Lady Arya asked her to look at herself. As soon as the girl opened her eyes, she was surprised and even asked if it was really her. Arya laughed and said it was her. They just covered up what was immediately obvious, so the best features became more visible. You could have kept it for yourself. Annie asked in surprise what she was talking about, to which our heroine replied that she was talking about cosmetics, which she rarely uses. Arya almost immediately understood one truth. This girl had been secretly using Mielle cosmetics little by little, and cosmetics that common people use cannot emit such a strong herbal scent. Annie's eyes sparkled at the sight of the jewels. She is so young that she cannot yet hide her greed, and our heroine took advantage of this. The girl said again that she didn't have freckles, so she shared her cosmetics, and since she had given her everything, she asked her to take this too. The maid was already uneasy, but our heroine assured her that it was a gift in honor of her becoming her maid. If she had been with her from the beginning, she would have given her what Jessie had. At that moment, Annie remembered the gold brooch. Arya assumed that she had seen that gold brooch simply because Jessie always wears it. Annie almost swam as soon as she heard the word gold. However, our heroine said that she was right. It was her gift for her loyalty, but Annie could not get one yet. After fixing her hair, our heroine told her that she hadn't done anything yet. And yet, looking at the shocked Annie, the girl said that it did not mean that she wanted anything from her. She just had not yet won her trust. Arya said that she really hopes that in the future she will please her as her maid. Anyway, since she had decorated it, Arya suggested that they practice tea drinking. After a while, the girl sat and held the cup with slightly shaking hands. Arya said there are a couple of flaws, but she still does a good job. Annie had certainly been secretly rehearsing, imagining herself as an aristocrat. Having worked in the house of aristocrats since she was a child, she had decided that a noblewoman herself was no worse. Arya even laughed, because in truth, she promised such amazingly envious children as her. However, there was one thing, but this was a clear signal that she could very well pull her over to her side. Arya suddenly told Annie that she needed to relax her hand and not forget about her little finger. The girl tried very hard to do everything right. Our heroine watched all the movements and told her that it was already much better. Arya wanted to convey to Annie that she was the one who could make her dream come true. At that moment, the girl laughed and said that even if she learned it, it would be good. Our heroine laughed because she could hardly contain her smile. Arya smiled and said that life itself is full of coincidences. Soon, she leaned over and whispered that everyone always had a chance to repeat her mother's fate. Arya told her that this was also an accident. It was our heroine who was a living example of Annie's dream coming true. Looking at this child, she knew that the girl did not want to remain a maid for the rest of her days. Then she needed to understand that she was only offering benefits. At this point, Annie turned to the lady and said that the tea seemed to have cooled down, so she suggested going and making a new one. Arya's face changed, and she said that there was nothing to do, and she wanted to rest, so it was better to finish, and then she could be free. She also asked Annie to tell Jessie that she should take over from her. Soon our heroine lay down on the bed, realizing that she hadn't really succeeded the first time. Mielle still remained more authoritative. Day and night followed one another. Time was too fleeting. For example, on this day, there was a continuous bustle on the street. The reason was that Mielle's birthday had finally arrived. Our heroine, of course, perhaps understood it deep down, but she still thought about one thing all the time. She wondered what all this show was for. All this fancy packaging and the number of gifts. She couldn't even expect such luxury, and yet Arya certainly did not envy Mielle. The main reason was different. The thing is, Oscar never responded to her from that day on. Because of this, everything around her irritated her. Arya knew this guy wasn't the type to break promises, so most likely his answer just didn't get through. She wanted to believe it. Our heroine, as soon as she saw who got out of the carriage, immediately jumped up from her chair. She was in shock because the Count had just returned on Mielle's birthday, which of course was not surprising. Arya initially thought that Oscar had arrived, but her father truly loves his daughter. Although if you think about it, even the fact that he sent her a gift for her birthday also shows great progress. Our heroine was touched by how happy they looked, but because of this, she was increasingly looking forward to the day when revenge would be accomplished. She will never forget the day they did something horrible to both her and her mother. I wonder how long their smiles will last. Arya assured herself that she would expose their dirty essence anyway. Our heroine lived and woke up with the thought that one day she would definitely destroy these Recente. Anyway, it was good that today was Mielle's birthday party, so she would have a lot of fun using the hourglass to embarrass her. Arya was about to gather her thoughts and execute the plan flawlessly, but suddenly a young man came up and said hello. The guy approached Lady Mielle and said that this was their first meeting. Anyway, his name was Rain Pino, but asked to call himself just Rain. However, our heroine was in incredible shock because she saw this guy for the first time. Who is he? Anyway, the guy took out the gifts and said that they were all for Mrs. Mielle. He was wishing her a happy birthday. The guy explained that it wasn't he who had prepared all this, but his master, so there was no need to worry. He had helped them a lot on this trip, so he could be trusted. Arya was surprised. Was there really such a rich man among the aristocrats unknown to her? And still the girl decided that she definitely didn't know him, so she was curious about who he was. But Rain continued to shower Mielle with compliments. Our heroine was incredibly perplexed, and she was not at all happy about such an unexpected change. Although our heroine had already seen the Mielle dress somewhere, the girl suddenly remembered the fragment, realizing that this was the very dress that Oscar had given her back then. Did he send her a similar dress to the sister of the girl he was going to marry? He probably just took two similar ones. He doesn't have good taste, but he has a lot of money. Anyway, our heroine came closer to greet her father. Rain suddenly asked in surprise who she was. The Count said with a smile on his face that this was another of his daughters. Our heroine greeted Mr. Rain and said that her name was Arya. The guy at that moment became a little embarrassed, telling the Count that his daughter was incredibly beautiful. Arya was very happy to see this reaction, because she had not seen it since her previous life. And how could there not be such a reaction? Because in the past, men could never look away because of this face. Our heroine proudly adjusted her hair, and Rain at that moment turned to Mielle and said that he had an additional gift for her. Arya was shocked that this was, in fact, the entire reaction. The guy started communicating with his sister again. He gave her the fur that they had chosen together with the Count. Our heroine decided that, given the Count's focus on his daughter, there was nothing to gain here, so she said she would go up to her room. Nevertheless, the father turned to his daughter and asked her to accept this gift for her. Our heroine looked at him in surprise and thanked him. Previously, The Count only gave jewelry to his own daughter, so if anything changes, she is moving in the right direction. Soon, Arya burst into the building and said that she wanted to change her clothes, so she asked the maid to hurry up. Arya smiled and asked to prepare the dress from Mr. Oscar. She should focus on today's mission. She was going to make sure that this birthday was one that Mielle would remember for the rest of her life, and that she would be ashamed of this day. The action soon changes and moves to the banquet hall, where all the guys were already sitting at the tables and the music was spreading throughout the room. At that moment, the sound of shoes was heard, and soon all eyes were directed in one direction. Naturally, everyone was looking at Arya, who came down to congratulate her beloved sister on her birthday. Mielle didn't even know what to answer, but all the people around her started whispering and saying bad things. Arya came up to her sister and asked if she didn't like the bouquet, since she tried to choose the best ones. Mielle suddenly remembered and said that they were great. However, at that moment, the girl's gaze fell on the dress. Arya was glad that she noticed. It was the dress that she had received from Mr. Oscar last time. The girl said that she was also very surprised when she looked at it now. Most likely Oscar sent them similar dresses because they are sisters. He has good taste. Mielle, no doubt, walked around bragging to everyone that it was a gift from Oscar. Well, all that was left was to report that she was not the only one to receive such a gift. Soon the girl told her sister that guests were waiting for her. Our heroine began to go inside, and all the people continued to whisper about her, saying that she was even more shameless than they had heard. They assumed that Arya bought a similar dress out of envy of her sister. At this point, all the ladies decided to look at the manners of Lady Arya. They even began to laugh, expecting to see something terrible. Nevertheless, our heroine behaved absolutely calmly and ate cake away from everyone. Whatever people said around her, she was going to make those present and seeing with their own eyes doubt all the rumors. At that moment, people began to say in surprise that Lady Arya was somewhat different from what they had heard. Perhaps the Count's excellent upbringing helped here. Arya was somehow sure that this should help calm down the dirty rumors about her. But there's nothing you can do about its origin, so people will still talk. But now the question is, when can we start? Her main desire was an hour to start torturing Mielle, who was so annoying with her smile. However, at that moment, Mielle seemed to look at her sister and began to smile. Arya even recoiled, because she did not understand what was happening. At that very moment, Kane's voice was heard behind our heroine, congratulating his little sister on her birthday. With a heavy sigh, our heroine realized that it was only Kane. Suddenly, Mielle ran past Arya, running to meet Mr. Oscar. Our heroine thought that this evening was doomed to failure, but at that very second, her eyes opened wide. Turning her head, she really saw Mr. Oscar. The guy was congratulating the lady on her birthday. It was surprising that he never came to Mielle's birthday party, so why was his attitude so different from before? Moreover, the most offensive thing for our heroine was that he didn't even respond to her letter. With a heavy sigh, she assumed that she had managed to make a mistake in something, which on the contrary, made him like Mielle even more. And still, it hadn't seemed that way to her before. In any case, at that moment, our heroine noticed her brother's strange gaze on her. Arya suddenly realized what was going on. Even though she hadn't intended to smile at some Cain, she just couldn't help but grin. To think that he was staring so openly at his little sister, the boy looked at his sister in bewilderment and did not understand when she had managed to grow up so much. But Oscar also started looking at Arya the moment he noticed her. The guy blushed in an instant. At that very moment, our heroine began to smile even more, because she finally understood how everything was working out. In fact, he is interested in her, but his conscience is bothering him because he has Mielle, and he still came to the party. Looking at Oscar, our heroine was definitely sure of her guesses. The guy looked at the girl and did not understand what this strange feeling inside was. He looked at Arya and realized that he was constantly thinking about her, and for some reason, even knowing that it was impolite, he could not look away. Anyway, our heroine at that moment came closer to them. She greeted her brother and Mr. Oscar. The girl laughed and said that she had already addressed them several times. The guy immediately began to apologize for his rudeness. He said that they had not seen each other for a long time, but at that moment, her brother behaved like a child and simply turned around abruptly. What kind of reaction is that? The more she learns, the more pathetic the past Arya seemed to our heroine. It was just funny to realize that she had so stupidly allowed herself to be destroyed by this man and this stupid child. However, at that moment, our heroine realized that she shouldn't be here. The girl started apologizing, saying that she had interrupted their conversation and was taking up their time. It certainly wasn't funny at all, but still, Arya turned around and ran away almost in tears, asking to be excused. Oscar immediately came to his senses and called the lady. The music was still screaming throughout the hall, which is why our heroine did not hear Oscar's words, or pretended not to hear them. In any case, the guy ran after Arya, which almost brought tears to Mielle's eyes. After some time, the guy opened the door to Arya's room, who was sitting at the table. The guy suddenly asked, embarrassed, if he would disturb Lady Arya if he joined her. Of course, our heroine said that he would not interfere in any way. She herself could not believe that he had come. Arya thought he wouldn't come, and even managed to drink 3 cups of tea during that time. Well, it can be forgiven, since he did come. However, for some reason, our heroine didn't like the worried expression on his face. The guy understood that he was falling into the same trap as last time. He knows he should pay attention to Lady Mielle, but for some reason, he always cares more about Lady Arya. Suddenly, he took out a letter and said that it was the answer to her last letter. He decided to bring it himself, since he still hoped to meet her today. It all turned out interestingly. After all, the problem that had been filling our heroine's head all morning turned out not to be a problem at all. Arya suddenly asked the guy if he liked the evening. Oscar suddenly said that he is not a fan of receptions. What a coincidence! Our heroine does not like them either. Although the girl herself felt awkward from such a blatant lie, she said that she felt out of place. The guy supported her, saying that he liked to see her in other places. Arya suddenly laughed and said that their conversation was direct proof of his words. For some reason, they were talking much easier now than when they met downstairs. Remembering Mielle's look, the guy said that it was true, and Arya said that she wasn't very calm in her presence. Oscar kept telling himself that they were just pen pals, but somehow he couldn't act decent in front of her. Arya suddenly asked if he was staying for dinner. By the way, the guy had planned to return home early and then go to the academy in the morning, but the answer came out on its own. He agreed to stay. Our heroine was glad about this, because usually she felt quite sad in the estate. But if he stayed, it would be much easier for her. Smiling, the girl asked if she was right in thinking that they were friends. Oscar said the same word, thinking that everything was right. They were just friends and nothing more. Since they were just friends, everything would be fine. At the table, Rain continued to talk about how great the lady was. He asked if she really helped the Count with his business, since she was still too young. Mielle smiled and said that she only occasionally expressed an opinion, but she was glad when she could help. Rain suddenly said that she had helped his master too, when he decided to listen to her. Arya couldn't figure out what was wrong with this guy, because it seemed like he was forcing his master's sister on her. But at the same time, Mielle's betrothed is the eldest son of a duchy that immediately follows the imperial family in influence. Of course, one of the provincial families could suddenly become rich, but Arya was disgusted to even look at all these efforts. While Oscar did not take his eyes off Arya, Mielle told Rain that she would like to personally thank his master. Our heroine looked very sad and hoped that Oscar would notice that she was so unhappy and that she had not even been addressed once during the family conversation. And still, at least there was something funny at the table, because watching a boy who constantly blushes from just one smile is quite funny. And at the same time, Feigned had also been looking at Arya lately, so looking in his direction was undesirable. Mielle suddenly thanked the guy that even if he was busy, he came all the way for her, and she was grateful for the pendant that she liked. With tears in her eyes, she said that Mr. Oscar seemed to sense what she wanted, and so he gave it to her. However, the guy didn't react at all, because he was staring at Arya. The guy suddenly came to his senses and told Mielle that it was nothing, and the main thing was that she was happy. Mielle immediately looked at her sister in bewilderment, but our heroine did not understand what was happening, because he even prepared a gift appropriate, as for a beloved. Most likely, it only meant that he was trying to sit on 2 chairs at once, and while he was confused about the inability to hold both, it was necessary to make him prefer her. At this point, Mielle turned to her father and said that she had prepared something during his absence. She handed him the handkerchief, and the Count, perplexed, only said that it was very skillful. Mielle said there were some minor flaws, but she wanted to give it away quickly, so that's how it turned out. However, the Count said they were the most beautiful lilies in the world. Cain smiled and said it was really beautiful. Mielle smiled back and said she had one for her brother too. Rain was shocked because the lady was good at everything. Our heroine laughed in her thoughts, because there would definitely be no scarf for her. However, contrary to her expectations, she managed much faster. Of course, since Mielle embroidered it, it must be good for her father. Our heroine also decided to tell her sister that she has golden hands and her scarf is wonderful. The girl was incredibly happy because her sister praised her. It sounded as if she finally recognized her. Arya didn't understand what she was talking about, and it irritated her that she couldn't respond to this dirty trick. However, Mielle said that she had prepared handkerchiefs for everyone. She admitted that she was not very good at it yet, but hoped that the guests would accept them. Then she asked Emma to distribute the scarves. A moment later, Emma had given away all the scarves, but suddenly, Mielle said in bewilderment that there was not enough scarf for her little sister. Rain, perplexed, said that he had come without warning, so that was how it happened. He asked to take his handkerchief. Arya replied that she could not take what was given to the guest. Our heroine was surprised that her sister had thought to prepare spare scarves in case of unexpected guests. And still, our heroine would have run out of scarves anyway, even if there were 4 people sitting in the room. But Arya smiled and said that they were one family and lived under the same roof, so later she could embroider another one for her. Besides, if she did it so beautifully, she already imagined what a wonderful scarf she would get. Arya asked if they had agreed. The girl smiled and nodded. Our heroine decided that Mielle could continue her childish pranks, but she would not stoop to her level. She smiled anyway and said that she would try her best to live up to expectations. Arya asked her not to worry, because even when she was playing, she was doing everything perfectly. Whatever she does, the fools around her will still praise her undeservedly. Then who needs her efforts anyway? In any case, they decided to raise their glasses to the birthday girl. In the end, our heroine never received the scarf, even after a decent amount of time. It had been a long time since her birthday, so she could have shown off her embroidery. However, the girl noticed that her sister had learned to embroider too quickly, and there was probably some secret, and she needed to find out. Soon, Arya washed Annie again. The girl laughed, saying that now it was already winter, so the water for washing quickly cooled down, and you need to be patient a little. Arya explained that expensive medicinal herbs and perfume are added to such water, so the result will be noticeable immediately. Annie, of course, said that everything is fine. The maid said it was because the mistress had called her again. Arya was surprised, and then realized that Annie must have decided that she had done something wrong last time. Anyway, it was even good, because in this case, Arya was going to take good care of her. Our heroine said that she would soon go to Sarah's reception, dedicated to her debut. The girl said that she would take Annie with her, so she should be well groomed. But this is not because she hasn't called her for a long time, or that she feels sorry for her. Arya said that she was just giving her a chance to attend a noble reception. At that moment, Annie's eyes even sparkled. Our heroine suddenly said that she was very sad that she had not received a scarf from Mielle, and she still had not finished it. She wanted to come to the reception with the scarf and show it off. Arya suddenly asked how she managed to quickly embroider such beauty last time. Annie said in surprise that she had great difficulty finding a teacher. The classes were quite clear. She even briefly attended a couple of times. A good teacher then. This is another change of hours. Annie suddenly said that the teacher had already gotten married and gone abroad, so she was not here. Annie suddenly closed her eyes and said that the teacher embroidered the base, but the lady simply finished sewing the remaining ones, and that's how she embroidered them. Our heroine was very happy to hear this. She suddenly came closer to the maid and put something on her chest. The girl lowered her head and, to her surprise, discovered that she now had a Lady Arya badge on her. Arya asked if she remembered what she had told her that day. In their relationship, trust in each other should come first. Looking at Annie, who was shaking with happiness, our heroine said that she hoped that she would continue to serve her faithfully in the future. The girl proudly shouted that she would definitely show herself well for her. Our heroine laughed, because it was quite cute to watch this picture. And yet, everything went as she planned. The action moves to the next day. Once again, a whole carriage of gifts has arrived, especially for Lady Mielle. Mother was shocked. She suddenly said that they were going to have lunch, so she offered to join them. Rain smiled and said that he would consider it an honor. Our heroine was no less surprised, because this strange guy managed to come again, even knowing that her betrothed was the future duke. The course of events was certainly distorted. Rain suddenly smiled and told them not to worry, because the gentleman was only showing his friendliness. The countess asked in surprise who this gentleman was, since he had a great deal of interest in Mielle. However, the guy apologized and said that he couldn't say that yet. All he could say was that he was the heir of a rather noble family, and that he was very fond of exceptional individuals like Mielle. The woman was surprised that they had already met, but the girl said that she did not remember such an acquaintance. The guy said that the gentleman said that it was a chance meeting. Mielle suddenly asked if they could see him on that trip with his brother, to which Rain replied that they would meet soon anyway, and then he would understand everything. Our heroine was interested in any case, because it was interesting, but today she didn't take the hourglass with her. Otherwise, she would have undoubtedly questioned this guy, who looks too mysterious. At this moment, the girl guessed that, according to Rain, his master must be a foreign nobleman. The guy suddenly asked why Lady Arya decided so. The girl answered that she only assumed. She explained that she could not imagine anyone so rich in their empire, so she assumed he was not a marquise. Rain asked her in surprise why she had decided that. The girl said that in their country, there was not a single aristocrat who had not heard about the upcoming engagement of the future duke and Mielle, and the fate of the marquise was Sarah. It only followed that his master must either be a foreigner who was simply ignorant, or else it would have to be someone who was clearly confident that he could rival the heir to the duchy, but then it could only be their crown prince. Rain suddenly laughed, saying that he himself almost believed it. Arya asked in surprise, was it really neither one nor the other? Rain replied that if he told them, they would know everything right away. The guy said that she could satisfy her curiosity after another meeting of Lady Mielle with his master. But our heroine definitely didn't want to endure it. Still, she decided she had to hold on. She had to rely on Rain's stupidity and continue to pester him. She had to be careful. Arya assumed that all this was the price for using the watch, and it would be good if they found a use for it. But it was better to focus on pressing matters, and not on it. The countess advised the guest to try a specially prepared fig tart. The guy smiled and said that he was only glad about it. However, the action shifts to the next day, when Jessie opened the curtains, asking the lady if she had slept well. Arya said everything was fine, but her eyes said otherwise. The girl assumed they were swollen and asked for cold water to wash. Jessie looked after the lady, thinking that she had not been to receptions with a lady for a long time, was nervous, and probably could not sleep. Only Arya didn't sleep because she was reading until late. There was supposed to be the first reception after the debut, but did Sarah meet the Marquise? She hoped that everything went as it should. However, at that moment, a girl entered the room and addressed the lady. Turning her head, the girl noticed Annie in front of her, who was smiling shyly and asking if she could go like this. Our heroine smiled and said that she looked great, but what came over her? Annie said that she would simply be accompanying the mistress to an appointment for the first time. And yet our heroine said that there would not be a single person at the reception who could be angry with such a beauty. After all, she did not make her more beautiful for nothing. The action moves forward some time. The ladies greeted Arya, saying that she was beautiful and that her maid was just as beautiful. Our heroine, in turn, thought only that he seemed to have grown up, because he slept like a log. The ladies noticed this and said that although she had grown up, she was as charming as ever. Anyway, Arya asked how the debut went. All the girls immediately beamed, saying that a grand event had taken place. Judging by their reactions, Sarah had made a splash. Already sitting at the table, the girls were waiting for Sarah and knew that they had too much to discuss. But Sarah was actually late. A few moments later, a lady ran into the room, apologizing and asking if she was very late. The lady assumed that something had happened to her on the way, and the girl said that she was about to go out when suddenly a guest came to her. All the girls asked who this guest was, when suddenly she said that the Marquis's messenger had come to see her. It was immediately clear that the lady at the debut was with Marquis Vincent. They wanted to know what had happened there. Taking a sip, Sarah began to tell a story. Suddenly, she dropped her handkerchief and looked around. Soon she saw her handkerchief picked up by the Marquis. The girls squealed in amazement and asked what happened next. The girl said that for some reason he did not return the scarf to her immediately, but simply looked at it for some time, after which he asked if she could give him this magnificent scarf. And again, the ladies continued to insist on telling what happened next. Sarah became embarrassed and said that she herself did not notice how she allowed him to take the handkerchief. Soon he asked her to dance, and she heard that she was indifferent. However, he turned out to be a surprisingly affectionate person. Vincent was really a workaholic in the eyes of everyone. Women were not observed in his company. He almost never attended balls, but noblemen were obliged to attend debuts, so he came. Sarah just said that today he sent a necklace and a bouquet, but that was not all. He wrote a letter inviting her to a walk along the lakeshore before the snow melted. Arya was surprised, because he was more romantic than she thought. He was literally enchanted. However, at that moment, our heroine looked at the lady and asked if she liked the Marquis. All the girls began to answer for her, saying that it was impossible not to like him, because he was a Marquis. Arya in turn told Lady Sarah that she did not know what the Marquis was like, but judging by her words, he did not seem like a bad person. However, besides this fact, she would like to choose as her companion someone with whom she will feel happy every time she meets him. The woman suddenly smiled, saying that everyone was congratulating her, but her feelings seemed to be of no concern to anyone, so she was grateful for Lady Arya's kindness. Our heroine, in turn, said that her happiness was the most important thing to her, and she was incredibly grateful for Sarah's matching scarf. At this time, Annie, who heard everything that was happening, was simply shocked that an ordinary simpleton from the Viscount family began dating a Marquis. She began to think that she was not stupid either, and that if only she could get to such a reception, she might have a chance. Our heroine noticed the very look she expected to see, and so she began to smirk. That's right, Annie. She shouldn't have forgotten that the lady who could fulfill her desire was right in front of her.